All right, welcome to Clutch Burners Podcast, your home for stick shift drag racing, stick shift information, stick shift tech, and of course, a couple of really good stick shift driving guys. That's Rich Guido over there.
And that's Bill Armstrong over there. And our guest today is Ben Strader from EFI University, who is also a stick guy.
Woo!
Yep, absolutely.
So he is going to be bringing up our IQ substantially today.
That's not a real big stretch for me.
No, it's not a big challenge. But it can't hurt.
So I know we're having a little technical issues, but I'm going to lead Rich into, you have a story about a pulley setup or something, vacating your car?
Yeah, so Ben, if you're not familiar, typically we start off with a dumbass Guido story. So I'm gonna tell one that's gonna lead into your story and video that you sent us. But
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I was at a car show or if I was coming back from a drag racing event, but I'm cruising down the highway, doing highway speeds. Hear this horrendous noise.
100. That's 100 in Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, it's probably about 120 kilometers in Canada. But and all of a sudden I hear this horrendous noise, and I hear this something go under my car and out the back, and I don't remember seeing any small animals or anything. There's no people on the road, and I see this thing whipping through the air and bounce down the highway a bit and then go flying off into the ditch. I think my alternator light came on. And so anyways, I pull over and pop the hood and look, and my pulley, and it was Pro Charge at the time, my pulley for the Pro Charger, my pulley for the V-groove that turns my water pump, and my alternator, that ain't there anymore. It's all gone, actually. I'm not sure if I had a crank trigger on at that time, but the car would still run. It just had no cooling.
You were blow through, weren't you? A blow through at that time? Blow through carburetor?
It might have been. Yeah. But anyways, the car still ran. It just wouldn't run very far before it would overheat. But I put my tail between my legs and went wandering through the grass until I found some parts and pieces to see if there was anything salvageable.
That's the walk of shame.
Yeah. And I think what was going on there is the way it was mounted. The outside part of the balancer, when it moved, was actually hitting the pulley and was stressing the bolts. I didn't realize that at that moment, but figured it out eventually. I think it was, I don't know if mine is 3 bolts or 4 bolts at the time, but they were cleaned right off. And I think we have a video. We got a video a couple of days ago of kind of something similar. So
Pretty similar.
I'm interested to hear that story.
So are you going to do the video first and you want to talk about it, or you just want me to tell you what happened, or you just let us and tell me?
The video is going to get sandwiched right here. So
okay.
Go ahead.
So we'll do like the thing where they clap the hands so he knows where to edit it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know exactly why ours failed. I'm not too proud to admit when we do dumb stuff. But so this week we had an engine on the dyno, one of Bill's favorite small block Ford copies. We had an LS engine running on the dyno.
Perfect. Well put, Ben.
Yeah. we were using one of the Holley crank triggers, the 36-1 crank trigger wheel. That's really nice. They bolt right onto the front of an ATI balancer because we needed a second crank trigger. We had the factory one in the block running the engine, and then we needed a second one to run the data acquisition system where we have combustion sensors in the engine. And so we had spent a ton of hours dyno calibrating this engine naturally aspirated, and then the next step was to bolt on the Pro Charger. So it's like a F1A 94 or something on there, you know. The problem is that the thickness of that crank trigger makes the blower pulley spaced out farther than you'd like to have it. And so then your belt doesn't line up. And so when we were evaluating what to do, there's actually like a little spacer that goes behind like a hub spacer, concentric hub that goes between the ATI balancer and your blower pulley. And it happens to be very close to the same thickness as that Holley crank trigger. So we're going, well, I mean, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but geez, it's only a few dyno runs, you know? Well, boys and girls. It lasted quite a while, so long actually that we'd totally forgotten about that and never even went back to recheck the torque on the bolts in case they came loose or anything. And I'm real superstitious on the dyno, so I said something to the order of like, okay, guys, we're gonna do 3 or 4 more runs and then we're gonna be done. And everybody looked at me funny. I go, well, I never say this is the last run because that's like jinxes you. But sure enough, that was gonna be the last one. And we get going and we get the throttle open and this thing, we were doing runs from like the starter of the dyno pulls around 7,000 and you end about 9,250 or 9,300, something like that.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's normal.
No, that's on the low side for us. We'll get to that, but those LSs can't take it, But about 8,200 or so, all hell broke loose, and stuff was flying everywhere. And like all I could do was think to close the throttle and turn the ignition off. And I guess in my mind, the first thing I thought was like, oh crap, we blew it up, But normally when that happens, you see like oil coming out the bottom of the engine or a rod hanging out the side, and I was like, it doesn't look blown up. It's still spinning. And realized that it tossed the blower belt off. And so we're like, oh, well, so we shut everything down and we go walking in the dyno room. And I'm like, okay, there's like this huge gash in the wall. Like, and we probably fumbled around in the dyno room for like 5 minutes before somebody goes, hey, where's the crank trigger? Whoa, what? And so I thought it was like all the way in the wall. And I'm scratching my head, looking in the wall. And I'm like, it ain't there, man. And then I look up and inside the ceiling. And so it was like, man, this is nobody's ever allowed in the dyno room all the time. This is why, you dumb people shouldn't be allowed to touch this stuff. But man, that thing gave you no warning. It came off of there. And then I say no warning, but then everybody goes, oh, it sounded kind of funny when you were going to do the run. I'm like, oh, when were you going to tell me? Like,
So who made that crank trigger?
The crank trigger, by the way, is perfectly intact and bolted back on the engine already, but that's a Holley EFI crank trigger, 36 one.
I think you're going to be able to now buy Holley stuff at Home Depot under the drywall saw section.
Absolutely, yeah. That thing, I think it'd go right on the end of my DeWalt, to be honest.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. It was quite terrifyingly entertaining, I'll tell you that. So.
That is awesome. And
you almost needed one of your slow motion cameras in the dyno room, because that would have been pretty cool to watch it climb the one wall, take off, and
I would love to know how many revolutions it took to do that.
Yeah.
How many times it spun, and and then we said that, like, dang it, too bad we didn't have the high speed camera on it, but I want to point out though, just in case anybody starts throwing stones, but I'd always known stuff like that as a possibility. And so when we built and designed the dyno room, it has like sort of bomb proof walls, like for that special drywall. It's called Dead Rock. It's really thick and dense. It's noise canceling. And then it's got like 5/8 plywood behind that, and then 5/8 plywood on the other side of the stud. So, the reality is I don't know if it would stop a flywheel if that happened. But it did a pretty good stopping the trigger.
Well, as long as you're not in line with those rotating parts,
man,
head on, you're not going to be dead.
I don't think you can tell people about that and they believe you until they see something like that.
Yeah, the amount of energy that's released, like almost instantaneously, is mind-boggling.
Literally, we went and watched. We all had the videos on our cell phones and whatever, and it's like you can watch it 20 times, and I don't care how slow you go, you just can't see it. When the belt flies off, and then you see the drywall like spray the dust off the wall, but it was extremely, like a projectile out of a gun, Chinese star or something.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty fun,
crazy,
pretty entertaining.
So we've got past the intro question. Let's I'm really excited about this podcast today. So Ben, actually let's rewind a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your businesses, and so forth.
Well, it's only a 1 hour show, right?
Oh no. We can go.
We go till we're done. Okay, perfect.
Till we're done.
Good.
You call in sick right now for work tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm good. Well, hey guys, my name is Ben Strader, and I have a company called EFI University that I started just about 20 years ago. When I started the company, it was really because I had a bunch of friends that were older engine builders in the industry who were struggling to get their arms around tuning EFI. And so I kind of started out with like little weekend seminars, and then that grew into bigger and bigger stuff. And, before you know it, now it's 20 years later and we've taught our stuff in I think 9 or 10 different countries, like live seminars, in 9 or 10 different countries. And, untold tens of thousands of people have come through and learned about engines from our program. But probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we started doing an engine building and then kind of blueprinting, and then sort of morphed into engine racing, engine development program, mainly because I'm kind of an engine guy. I've always been an engine guy. I always wanted to be an engine guy. I just realized that I could make more money talking about stuff than actually working on it. So I kind of became the Anthony Robbins of, engine building and tuning and going around giving.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So most of my career has just been running my mouth.
Do you have a engine building thing down in where's his place?
Lake
Lake
Havasu.
Havasu, Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was thinking Bali, like you and Tony share a
Oh,
place.
yeah. got a dyno tucked away down there. Yeah.
Yep. Nice.
No, I started on a mission about 20 years ago I wanted to build a really high-end engine shop, but I didn't want to have a bunch of customers getting in the way of having fun. And so over the last 20 years, I've bought and paid for one piece of equipment at a time, and really grown our business without taking on a ton of debt or anything, because I really am passionate about the engine development side, like actual R&D, studying the science of engines. And I realized that if I became an engine shop, that you'd never get to do that. First of all, there's some wonderful engine shops out there. I'm not disparaging any of them, but the reality is there's not an engine shop anywhere in the country that does, that short of a NASCAR or like an NHRA Pro Stock, short of that, there's not a shop anywhere in the country that's doing real R&D at the level that we are at EFI University, because you can't afford to try experimental things on a customer's engine. And there's always this time crunch of pressure to hurry up and get the engine done because the guy's got XYZ race coming this weekend. And so you never get to stop, or you never get to slow down and just experiment and try stuff and literally say, hey, we're going to do this knowing full well it might fail and blow up. And if it does, we'll pick up the pieces and start over again and do it. That's not jobs.
Yeah, I just want to put my camel hump heads on my 283 and make it scream.
Right. You're right. Exactly. So I don't mind there's all that out there. It's just not interesting to me, right? Like I want to know, I'm a why kind of guy. I need to understand and know why stuff works. And so the way that I've aligned my career with professionals in the industry, the way I've set up my shop with the equipment we have, was mainly because I really got tired of asking people questions and not getting answers. And if you got answers, it was all just religion. And what I mean by that is like, Rich Guido is the fastest Canadian on the planet with Pontiac, so that's why I do it this way. I'm like, okay, but why does he do it that way? Well, I don't know. I don't know. He said, stop asking me questions, So I just didn't want to be that way. And so I tell people in our school, EFI University, teach the things that we most need to learn. And I never try to be the smartest guy in the room. I never pretend I'm the smartest guy around. But I absolutely won't let you slide if you say something that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to ask why, and then you're going to have to either defend it or we're going to agree to disagree. And then, I might go out and put it on the dyno and test it. But
so can we agree to call you Professor Ben?
How about Faux-fessor?
What?
How about Faux-fessor?
Is that spelled F-A-U-X?
Yeah. Total fraud, faking it.
Okay.
Yeah, what is that guy feel? Yeah.
You can call me whatever you want. The reality is there's a bunch of people that love me and there's a bunch of people that hate me. I don't really care, man. I just want to know the truth. And so we go to work every day when we're not teaching classes and we try to learn more stuff. And then we go around and share it with people that come to our classes. And so when I say there's a lot of people that hate me, it's a lot of those guys that have got this cult following, almost religious cult following of people that buy their engines just because they told them they're the smartest.
You mean the ones with the camel hump heads?
Double hump heads.
Oh, double. Yes.
Yeah.
Double camel hump heads.
Got the 202 valve and
Woo!
Yeah. So
RV cam.
Yeah. 3/4 race.
Sorry.
Yeah. 3/4 race. So no. So anyway, that's it. We ton of real hardcore research and development. And then we take what we learn, we turn it right into our curriculums, if you came to my class, you'd love it. And then if you came 3 years from now, it would be like a totally different class again, because we're not stopping. We're not just reciting the same old stuff that everybody else on the internet is posting.
Aren't you worried that internal combustion engines are going to be outlawed in 2035?
Well, the good news for me is I can probably retire by then. So,
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, like, somebody asked me that recently. When are you going to start doing classes on EV? And I'm like, look, man, I'm not against EVs. I think they're tons of fun. I don't think the science makes any sense. I don't think the political side of it makes any sense. I don't think it's sustainable. I think that with work we could get there. But the one thing I know for sure is you're going to have a tough time gaining people sitting in stands and having passion about the noise that an EV makes going down a drag strip.
Yeah, and I think what you just said, the politics and what was it you said?
Shoot, I don't know. I
Common sense. Those
along,
don't.
yeah.
Those. Yeah, I don't think those ever line up.
And again, like if you've ever had the chance to ride in one, they're a riot. They're tons of fun. I got nothing against
They're pretty ridiculous.
They are. I just think, like everything in life, you should get a choice, right? Like we shouldn't cram it down everybody's throat and force them to throw away the stuff that we've spent so much time developing.
Yeah. So that this question is off script. Based on what you do you have OEMs coming to you for R&D or any of your developmental stuff?
None of the OEMs. When you say OEMs, I'm thinking Chrysler, Ford, Toyota. No, none of those. But a lot of our revenue comes from aftermarket OEMs. I mean, the bigger companies, your Edelbrocks, your Comp Cams, your Driven Racing Oils, your piston companies, your
interesting
big, crankshaft companies. So a lot of these manufacturing type companies, they don't have the
Fram oil filters come.
Yeah, we do a lot of Fram oil filter testing. Yes.
The orange ones.
Yeah. No, Wix Gold. That's it. We only do Wix Gold.
Oh,
but no, we do a significant portion of our revenue comes from new product testing. There were, and I don't want to, I can't remember if I signed any NDAs. Let's put it that way. So I don't want to say something that gets me in trouble. But there were a number of companies displaying brand new products that they developed at SEMA this past week. That we did all the dyno testing and reporting on, and so a lot of their display data came right from our shop.
That's awesome.
Awesome. I'm really proud of that.
Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of equipment do you have in your shop?
Okay, well, I have 2 roller chassis dynos that mainly get used for training EFI tuning stuff with lower horsepower vehicles. That way people can learn and make mistakes and not blow up the cars. Then we've got a mainline hub dyno so that we can do like higher horsepower testing stuff. We've got an engine dyno, which is kind of a cross between an older Superflow 901 frame, but with mainline electronics and controls.
And that's the one in the drywall video, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Remodeling video.
Yep.
Video.
It's a dyno room modification machine. And yeah, so that's basically like 901 frame with a Superflow brake and all that. But the way that dyno works is almost completely reversed from a Superflow. All the water controls and the way that we run the dyno is almost exactly the opposite of a Superflow. And we can get into talking about that at some point if you care to. But there are strategic reasons why. But moving on from there, then we have some like pretty hardcore like digital microscopes, so we can do a lot of pre and post-mortem analysis. Like before we put an engine together, we can zoom in on parts and look really closely at them, that kind of thing. And then in the unlikely event that we have a failure, we do a lot of failure analysis under the microscope and trying to figure out what went wrong and why and how. Then we've got a Spintron. One of the only
That's like the holy grail.
It is, yes. The Spintron is really the key to why we can do the things on the dyno that we do, which then immediately translates into the race car on track. So I'll give you some specific examples as we get going. I'll talk about our Ford program and how we were able to improve that with the Spintron. And then we've got like Rottler CNC Hone. We got a brand new CWT balancer, some of the Sun equipment to do basic machine work. I don't have a full machine shop, mainly for 2 reasons. First of all, if I had a machine shop, I would get more friends than I wanted. But also because we mainly do research and development, I'm constantly working on the same engine all the time. So we put it together, we run it on the Spintron or maybe on the dyno, and then we immediately take it all apart and measure everything. And so when you're doing that over and over again, we might build 4 or 5 times in a year, we might build the same engine and run it on the Spintron or the dyno. I don't need to line hone it and bore it and deck it and do all those kinds of operations. Usually we'll buy a brand new block. I'll send it to somewhere to do all that CNC block work. And then that's kind of the last time it ever needs to do that.
Do you have a pretty big assortment of dingle ball hones?
I have a whole wall of them. We call it the dingle wall, actually.
Nice. And you do the dingle dance in front of that wall, I'm sure.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. No, we're really fortunate. We have a 6 diamond stone CNC hone, and that's a super fun toy that has dramatically improved our program.
Wow.
But then we've got, like CNC plasma tables and welders and grinders and all the things you need to fix when you screw stuff up. So, but other than that, I'm really primarily a vocational school first, and then everything else we do is to support that goal. But we can't be a great school if we're not constantly learning new stuff.
How many students do you think you put through a year?
4 or 5 years ago, it was like 600 a year, probably. And all of our classes are very short duration, what I call a la carte, because our clientele is typically grown-ups. They're not young guys that just got out of high school and are looking to do a 2-year degree program like UTI, Techs, all that kind of stuff, Lincoln Tech. We're not really competing with those. Most of my clients are either already in the industry at the engine tuner or builder level, or they work for a professional race team or a professional shop, and they got wives, girlfriends, mortgage payments, car payments. They can't be gone for 18 months. They need to get in, be hyper-focused, get what they need so they can go back to work and be productive and profitable. All of the courses we do are laser-focused, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days of you literally sit down at 9 a.m. and drink out of the fire hose until 5 p.m. And then you go home and you're like bewildered, and you come back the next day and do it all over again for however many days that takes.
So there'd be no room for a fraternity or anything like that there, right?
We actually have a fraternity. I love your
what?
Yeah. In fact, one of our alumni is here with us on the podcast tonight. So
is it your best student ever?
Well,
I'm not a student. I'm not a student. I haven't attended a course yet, but
that's right. Yeah, more of a member of the brotherhood. So yeah, I'll tell you how that happened, Bill. We started our fraternity about probably a year and a half ago, because I'll be honest, when 2020 came along and the whole world shut down, I wasn't exactly sure what we were going to do. I make a living of people traveling on airplanes or cars to come visit me for a week at a time, and if you can't do that, I don't have any way to do it. And we do online training as well, but I'll just be honest with you, online training sucks. It's a necessary evil. It's a way for me to reach more people, and I'm really glad that we have it, but nobody learns anything by reading a book or watching a video about it. If you were, you mentioned earlier, Bill, you got a private pilot license, right? So if you had only ever flown Microsoft Flight Simulator, and then they're like, okay, you ready? Go, there's the airplane, go do it. You're not ready. You haven't done that, and so
I like to just crash into cars and buildings on a sim.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto or something,
Right? Yeah.
But that's not the same. And I tell everybody, until you buckle that belt and the wheels leave the ground for the first time, and you feel that pit of your stomach kind of fear and anxiety and that tension, you haven't really flown an airplane. And it's the same thing. You can read every book in the library. You can watch every physics video. You can do step-by-step how-to lectures on how to ride a bike, but until you get on the bike and pedal, you ain't going to get it. And so my school exists so that you can come and do it. It's a place where guys, can come and look at something and get access to something that you can't get anywhere else. You're not going to go to a high-end engine shop and say, hey, do you mind if I watch over your shoulder while you build an engine that goes 10,000 RPM and just kind of see what you do and take notes? Like, there ain't a shop in the world that's going to let you do that. Right. But when you come to EFI University, you can. There's no tuning shop with a dyno that's going to let you come and sit in a car and practice on their dyno. At EFI University, you can. So I do online video training, and we offer that as kind of a stopgap for people that can't make the trip. But I see it as the gateway drug. When you do that, you're going to want to come and do more, because that's, we tell everybody that learning is defined as a change in behavior that's based on experience. So when you're a kid and mom or dad says, don't touch the stove, what'd you do? You touch the stove, right? Like, well, I don't do that anymore. That was a crappy experience. So we can have good experiences.
I still have a scar from it.
I just did it last week. But we have to have experience. experiences that change our behavior, not lectures and online videos and reading books. And so that's what our mission is to give people a place where they can come and experience things that you can't experience anywhere else.
That's awesome. So drill down a little bit. Like, so I want to come to your school, but it's a la carte. So like you have a selection of classes to take. Is that how that works?
So to be honest, I used to have a huge array of classes.
Okay.
And so there was 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 different things you could do. You know, wiring courses, you could do turbocharging courses, you could do engine courses, EFI tuning courses, manufacturer specific. Like for a lot of years, we were the West Coast authorized distributor, I guess, if you want to call it that, for people that wanted to get Holley certified. So they would, instead of going to Bowling Green, they would come to Lake Havasu. Same with AEM and Holley, and Haltech and Motec. We've had agreements in places over the years with all these manufacturers to do that. But again, first of all, I don't really enjoy doing the manufacturer specific ones, the Holley, Haltech, Motec, AEM, because their stuff is changing so rapidly that if you're not using it every day, I mean, I would have guys come to a class and they've got a later version of the software than I'm teaching. And it's like, crap.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You need somebody from that company to do that kind of work, to be honst with you.
Sure.
So
yeah. So like an engine. Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
So like what do people typically come down to take? Like your engine class and then they pair it with another one, or? So
what's happened is over the years, I've been looking at the demand and what classes really were great and really, you know, and some of those I took, like, for example, we did this advanced turbocharging concepts course, which is phenomenal. Like, it is absolutely amazing content, but it was really a one-day course. And so people would have to travel from all over the country, all over the world to come for just one day. So it made the course really expensive. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to teach that course in front of a camera and offer it online. So a lot of that stuff, we just said, we can't do it all. It's too expensive. And so I'm all the way down to, since 2020, we basically are down to the last 2 courses, which is our boot camp EFI tuning course called ACP, Accelerated Certification Program. It's 5 days long. You start on Monday in the classroom, like 8th grade auto shop, you know, here's the 4-stroke engine cycle kind of thing. We work all the way through how your ECU interacts with the engine. It's actually a lot about how engines really truly work instead of the way everybody thinks they work. Even like professional tuners that I talk to on a daily basis, they just get it wrong, you know? Yeah. So we get to the point where by the time you're done with that class, I could give you an engine combination. Okay, you got a 450-inch small block, and you have
small block Ford.
Small block Ford, yeah. So you've got a Pro Charger with 18 pounds of boost, and you're using Q16 as your fuel type, and you have 1,000 cc per hour injectors. Your target lambda is 0.9. I want you to tell me how long the injector pulse width needs to be to make that happen. And so you can use the math and the formulas to predict the engine's performance with a terrifyingly accurate degree of precision.
And that's basically what Bill and I do now. Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we have 2,000 cc injectors, of course.
Well, you can make twice as many mistakes that way.
That's right. That's exactly what Rich and I are doing.
You know, one thing is like
180 VE. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. What's the problem? No issue. Yeah. So we spend a ton of time in that class teaching people the how and the why ECUs work, right? Like there's a million places people can go learn to tune, you know, plus, minus.
That's spelled TOON.
TOON. Yeah.
That's right.
Yep. But none of them really teach you the tools that it takes. You know, you guys know what a base map is, I'm sure. Not 98% of people start their calibration journey with a base map. That's a calibration that somebody else made or tuned that's pretty close to what you have. And so it's a place to start from that gets you going. And my argument is that somewhere in the world, there was a guy smart enough to make that base map from nothing.
Yeah.
So I want my students to be that guy. I don't want you to have to pick up the phone and call somebody and go, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I set that up? Or, you know what I mean? Like, so they leave at the end of that week. We're out on the dyno and they have to I give them the engine size, the injector size, the barometric conditions, the elevation, the, barometric pressure, all that stuff. and you have to make your own base map from nothing and then tune the car on the dyno as a team. Our students do it as a team, and they leave going, look, I know I don't know everything there is to know about engines and fuel injection, but my God, it's not nearly as hard as I thought it was if I use it as science rather than some religious belief that the guy that gave me the base map is the smartest guy around. You know, that's really what our thing is all about.
You know, it's so funny that you say it like that because a friend of Rich's, who is a friend of mine now, also is a tuner and not with a double O.
He knows Matt.
I do.
Yeah, we're
Yep,
talking
I know
about
Matt very well. Great guy and very sophisticated tuner.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like literally he rode in my car for 20 minutes and the changes he made to my street tune is unbelievable how much better it drives. But I you know, asking him questions and stuff, he goes, dude, it doesn't matter what the engine is. It's all about the math, the numbers.
Yep.
And I never had heard anybody say that until you just said it. And that makes total sense because it's the calibration. I mean, yeah, that's awesome.
The biggest problem that I run into with professional tuners, not Matt, is that they honestly don't know how the engine works. And so I can say that with confidence because I talk to a lot of engine people a lot, and I ask very specific questions, and then the answers that I get don't line up with science. And so that's my thing is like the difference between science and religion is that any religion you want to look at, they're all the same in that being a part of a religion is a choice that you make, right? You say, well, I know I can't prove that my version of religion is the right one, but I'm still going to choose to believe it. Even though I had a 2-hour conversation with a really nice guy the other day, it was, I don't know, Catholic, Buddhist, Mormon, you know, Muslim, whatever the other brand was. We argued until we were blue in the face, but his faith requires him to believe something he can't prove. And my faith requires me to believe in something I can't prove. So there's really never any way to know for sure. We'll just have to wait until we all die and figure out who is right. But see, science says, no, I'm not going to accept any contradictions. I'm still going to search for the truth, even if the truth hurts my feelings. And it will often, right? Like there's so many times I think I know what I'm talking about and the truth kicks me in the face and says, yeah, you're dumb.
So are you
willing to be wrong?
Are you easily offended? Is that what you're saying?
Extremely. paper thin skin.
Oh, wow.
Very, very anemic. Yeah. Yeah, no. So, I mean, I don't want to come off like I'm, I don't know, overly aggressive about it, but I'm passionate about doing things correctly. And I know that I'm kind of dumb and I often do things wrong and it bugs me. So I'm constantly in this like mode of what else can we do? What else can we learn? I mean, my goodness, this last week, the amount of things that I learned about engines from running on the dyno and testing surpassed, you know, the last 3 years combined. You know, it's like I never stop learning.
The more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
The more miserable you become. You know what I mean? You're like, there's so much crap that I have questions. You know, all I did was develop more questions about things that now I really want to know, you know?
Yes.
And then you look around you and you look at these other guys that are doing things in this ultra mediocre way with such high levels of confidence. And you know, they got this swagger because they don't really know anything. So you just shake your head and you're like, I can't even help this guy. Like, he doesn't want my help. I can't go over and tell him what he's doing is wrong. He's not going to believe me anyway, because I'm not going to change his religion. But
the thing that's what I love about the sport, actually. It's something as simple as a balancer. How it can mess your life up so much. And I mean, you know, that was one nice part about being part of the fraternity is I was having balancer issues, and we spent one day just talking about balancers. And then you hear, you know, guys who are making 3,500 horsepower are having the exact same issues with balancers.
Yep. And what's the name of the fraternity? I think we neglected to say that.
Yeah, we got way out down in the rabbit hole there. So the fraternity is called Delta Lambdas, and it's the Brotherhood of BTUs, right? And it's basically,
I love it.
it's a group of people with a common goal, which is to find ways to be better at making power. The reason that I started the fraternity was because during that whole downturn in 2020, when we were unsure of how we were going to make it, I was like, okay, I need to parse down the classes we're doing because I don't want to do a whole bunch of classes that are part filled. I want to do a few classes that are really full. So now we're down to, we just offer that week-long boot camp tuning class and a 3 to 5 day engine development course where we go through, you know, the scientific side of clean sheet. You want to develop an engine, design a racing engine. how do I choose the size of the engine? How do I choose the RPM range? How do I choose the bore and stroke combination? How do I know how much cylinder heads required? What size valve should I be using? We spend an entire day or a day and a half just understanding the dynamics of camshaft load profiles with regards to valve train geometry, spintron data, how to mathematically design an engine with a piece of paper and get it, instead of just buying a pile of parts and hoping they all work together, how to predict with a high level of accuracy what that thing is going to perform like using your calculator and a little bit of knowledge and science. So the only complaint that I ever have about people that attend those classes, the only complaint is that I wish I didn't have to go home. I wish I could stay another week. I wish I could stay another 2 weeks. I wish I could come back and do more, but it's hard. People have lives and they got stuff they got to do. So to me, the fraternity was a way to stay connected with them and continue the learning process. So they join this subscription-based fraternity. They pay a monthly fee. We do all kinds of interactive lessons, weekly or bi-weekly. So we have this huge library of, they can go back through and go, so what was that one on like choosing the right, cylinder head CFM for my engine? Or what was the one on camshafts? Or they can go back and watch those 24/7. And then every week we get together as a group and we do a Zoom chat just to discuss problems and, solutions. And man, the level of quality of individuals in that group is mind blowing. We have, guys that are actively working in NASCAR Cup engine shops, guys that are working on NHRA Pro Stock teams. We got, legendary industry icons that are there for mentoring the younger people, active racers, Nick Agostino's. I think that's who you were talking about, Rich, on the balancer thing.
Well, so, and Rich Guido. Rich Guido's in there.
Well, I was getting there, I was way down the list,
Working his way down to get to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, we save the best for last,
That's right.
I was building up some, some anxiety there, everybody primed, but no, like it's incredible. The level from totally like amateur level grassroots people all the way up to, Mark Cronquist, who's head of engine development at Joe Gibbs Racing, is in the brotherhood, so
wow.
It's really amazing that you could access people like that who in their normal lives would never have time to stop and, answer an email or a phone call or whatever. But like, here you are on a Wednesday night hanging out in this group.
So what are the hazing tactics like? Should I be scared?
It's ridiculous. It's bad.
We should talk clutch. Why don't we talk about, why don't you give us some more details on Robbie's car?
Okay, we can start with Robbie's car. So Robbie Blankenship is my very close friend and now business partner. I met Robbie back in 2017 or 18. I was giving a weekend seminar on engine EFI tuning down in Tampa, Florida, I think it was. And it happens to be that he's from there. Now, I didn't know him at the time, but I had heard of him. I knew who he was. I knew his engine builder. I knew enough about him to know, like, he's one of the fast guys, So he went to the weekend class and kind of said, like, my reason for coming is I've been struggling and I really want to make the switch from carbs to EFI. And so I thought maybe this is a good place to start. I think he was kind of surprised or taken aback that I even knew who he was or about his program or anything. And so that just led to some more emails and conversations. And next thing you know, we're talking on the phone weeks after the class and he's asking about Spintron stuff and talking about the problems they've been having with their valve train. And one thing leads to another, and he's kind of beating around the bush going, hey, do you think you could do some Spintron work for me? And so I was interested, but I'll be honest, I was nervous, right? Like, I've done a lot of cool stuff, but I hadn't really worked with anybody like that. And traditionally, I don't have customers. Like, I work on our stuff just so we can experiment and learn. So like, that adds another layer of pressure if you've got to perform for somebody that's actually writing checks, and then that turned into, hey, I'm changing engine builders and I don't really know where I'm going to go. And do you want to take on the whole program? And I was like, but I did. So the engine is the 400-inch small block Ford naturally aspirated. It's a pretty unique version though. Bill, you're a Ford guy, so I'll give you the quick rundown. It's it's what we call a C. Are you familiar with CGI, a compacted graphite iron?
A little bit. It's in pencils, right?
Yes, exactly. Very compacted though. It's an extremely hard material. These are what are called file core blocks though. So they're effectively Windsor dimensions.
Yep.
Except they're ultra short deck height. So the deck height is 8,850.
Oh wow.
And so what they do is they take the CAD drawing and they basically section down the water jackets and the oil galleries and everything so they can make it shorter without like losing all your bolt hole locations and all that, moving lifters down and all that kind of stuff. So they're 850 deck height, Windsor dimensions, but they use 302 main bearings. So they cast these blocks like that at Dart, and they probably made, I don't know.
The 302 main bearing, the Cleveland is a 275. The 302 is a 3-inch, right?
No, 250. I think.
Oh, even smaller then.
Yeah, really small.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, less crank or less velocity at the bearing.
Correct. Bearing surface speed is the key there. So I think 250 is what those are.
Awesome. Okay.
Really small. And then we run a BMW bearing for the connecting rod. So it's inch 775 bearing journal is the rods.
That's the same as like a Briggs and Stratton, right?
I think it's a little smaller than a Briggs.
But doesn't have the scoop to splash lubricant.
Right. Yeah, okay. we don't do splash oiling. We actually pressurize them. But when he came to me, that thing, honestly, he told me I hadn't finished a race in 5 years. He would always be fast. He could always qualify number 1 or number 2, but they were just having failure after failure.
And this was drag or circle track?
This is drag race. Yep.
Okay.
This is NA10.5, NMCA, NA10.5 class.
Okay.
A very competitive class, very similar to Australian Pro Stock, basically. So,
okay.
Basically, they would either have valvetrain trouble or they would have tuning issues because of the carburetors. And so he was looking to do something about both of those.
Yeah.
So I took the engine and I spent about a week dissecting it. And then I gave him this huge written report of here's all the things you have. These are where I see problem areas. This is what I would do differently. This is how I would attack it. And he kind of called me and he's like, what are you guys doing over there? And I was like, oh man, I knew this was going to happen. I look like an idiot now, right? Like, what did I do wrong? Right. And so he's like, I've never in 25 years of racing had any engine builder share as much information with me as you guys just did. Like, I don't even understand. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to tell you all that stuff. And he's like, well, you boys do it different. I'm in, So we took the engine and started to work on some of the changes that I wanted to do. We made some piston modifications, a ton of valve train modifications. And
what's sorry to interrupt. What style of cylinder head was a canted valve like
D3? Yeah.
D3. Okay. Well, it's just like a NASCAR head, right?
Yeah.
For people that aren't
highly modified, moved valve locations, welded up and moved forward, but basically essentially a D3.
Got it.
So it had a single 4-barrel carburetor on it. I wanted to change that to 2 4-barrel EFI throttle bodies.
Okay.
I wanted to make some significant changes to the piston, pocket area, ring size, ring location, wrist pin height, stuff like that. But mostly I had a laundry list of changes that I thought we needed to do on the spin trunk.
This was a NA motor, correct?
This is NA. Yep. 400 inches NA. So he said previously they could make 2 runs and they would always have to change several valve springs. They would either be blued, broken, dropped a valve, whatever. By the time we were done, it took us about 4 months. By the time we were done, I could do 36 runs to over 10,600 RPM on the Spintron and on the same set of valve springs.
Can you even hear the smile on my face? That is so awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah. So I took it off the Spintron. We assembled the engine with the same valve springs and probably made 20 or 30 engine dyno runs. This thing makes 3 horsepower per inch. It makes 1,204 horsepower at 400 inches. At little over 10,000 RPM. We turn it 10.8 on the track. Just the way we have the car geared and everything, it goes faster if you get more average power going past peak power. And we run a Liberty 5-speed in it. We run a dual 7, I can't remember if it's 7 or 7.5 inch ram clutch in it that we started with Kale at Black Magic, who I think, Rich, maybe you run one of his clutches.
Yep, I have one
there. Yep, we started there and then kind of progressed into some differences in discs and fingers and stuff like that. But now we go out there and beat up on them a whole bunch. The car's 2,800 pounds. We typically go across the scales 2,805. We go 110, 111 to the 60 foot, 760, 770 is about 175 miles an hour, and it gets the program.
Dude, can I give you a virtual high five?
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty mean for just a small block forward,
That is impressive as hell.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that. So we have 2 complete engines in the program right now, and a third one being developed. And all of our engines get nicknames. So we have Old Smoky, which got its nickname because I was really experimenting with super light oil ring tensions. And so when you do that on the starting line, they tend to smoke a lot when you have the clutch pushed in, because what happens is you're on the 2-step, and the cylinders that don't have combustion pressure they're not sealing the rings as well against the wall, and so you get a little oil in the combustion chamber.
Yeah.
You'll see this a lot. Like if you watch a lot of pro stock racing, you'll see a lot of pro stock cars will smoke blue on the starting line until they let the clutch out, and then it'll clean up and go away. So ours did that the whole season for 2020, and it got the nickname Old Smoky. So that's our, we call the primary engine, and then the backup engine we call Warhorse, because it's been beat up and blown up and re-sleeved and refixed so many times, but just keeps on going. You know, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of hated that engine for a while because it's just, man, it's so freaking gnarly how beat up that thing is. But in last year, at the very first race of the year, we had a small issue that was easy to fix in the shop and really difficult to fix at the track with Old Smoky. So we made the call to pull it out, and we put the junky old Warhorse in there, and we ended up running the whole season and setting the national record with that engine this year on this beat up old backup engine. So
wow,
pretty spicy little program. And then we have a third one in the works. So the end goal is that we always have one engine in the car, one on the trailer as a spare, and then one in the shop that I'm working on to try to find more and make it better.
And what's number 3's name?
You know, I'm working on that. I think it's going to be something like Moonshot, but I'm not 100% sure yet, because
how about Menage a Trois?
Hey, that's not bad. Yeah. I'm trying to do something that I don't know, because it doesn't have a personality yet, you know, and you got to kind of, they earn their names. The goal for that engine is we're on the hunt. We're looking for an extra 1,000 RPM.
1,000 RPM. So 11.8.
That is the goal. Yeah.
Boy. So, okay. So and this is in our questions, but I am so intrigued with this because Rich and we've been friends for, well, we met in 2013. So we've been really good friends, and we've had so many
like
conversations.
2019 then.
What's that?
Known each other, but how long have you been friends? I was saying, like,
well, 2013 and a half. But you know, with the amount of driving, and Rich takes top tier there, but with the amount of driving we do with our cars, valvetrain has always been an issue,
Sure.
with wear and tear and whatnot. And up until this season, I'd always run a solid lifter, solid roller cam, you know, and I always had a lot of valve string pressure. And, you know, where I started, I had never built a boosted motor before. So I had, you know, I had Engine Builder build that for me because I didn't know what to, you know, I didn't know where to start. And it had over 900 pounds over the nose of valve spring pressure. And, you know, I was just an idiot. I did race week with it and drove it home. And oh my God, we went to set lash, and I swear I cranked a 1/4 inch back into it. And then everything failed when I got home. I mean, there were needle bearings. It was just a mess. And then I went with another cam guy, fairly well known, John Bewley. He spec'd me a cam, and it was like 700 something over the nose, and actually had great luck. It ran awesome. And even when you looked at the dyno sheets, the power curve was smoother, which told me that the valve train stability was better. And I ran that for a while. And then I jumped to another cam, and I don't even want to mention the name because it was a horrible experience. And this year I switched to a hydraulic roller, and I am so happy with it. I have gone, now it's like 165 pounds on the seat and like 4 1/4 over the nose, and it's quiet. I'm like, what is that little noise on there? Oh, it's a tiny exhaust leak, because I can actually hear it now. But I want you to talk more specifically about valve train and what works. Like, is there an upper limit? I'm guessing this 12,000 RPM motor is solid. It's probably not hydraulic, but like, is there an upper limit for a hydraulic? Like, is it a low lash solid? Like, what kind of spring pressures? Like I am super fascinated, like how you're making this stuff live, and those RPMs, that's just bananas. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely freaks people out when they come to watch us dyno stuff, and you're beginning the dyno pull at 8,000 or 9,000 RPM.
Right. Like if I money shift mine like an oh shit, like it sees 82 and I'm like, oh my God, I've ruined stuff.
Yeah,
And thankfully I haven't, but you're just starting there.
literally. Yeah, like an average dyno pull for us starts at 8,200, so. Okay.
But can that motor cruise down the highway at 1,700 RPM?
Well, I think we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, probably more than you could do in 2 days of discussion. So I'm going to hit the high points. The thing about valve trains are every one of them is unique. And so, if you worked on one, well, then you've only worked on one. It's not if you've done them all, right? Because the way that the valve train's actually responding is everything in the engine is a spring, even the block. It just has a really high frequency spring, right? And so we tend to think of camshafts as lift and duration. And, I don't even know the last time I've had a conversation about valve springs that had anything to do with spring pressure. So we talk about seat loads and loads over the nose, so like Robbie's 400-inch Ford, those things are between 390 and 400 on the seat and about 1180 to 1230 over the nose, something like that, right?
Basic street motor.
Yeah, your basic street motor. Yeah, exactly. I probably wouldn't want that for drag wheel. But what I will tell you is that I would say the overwhelming vast majority of engines that I see are way oversprung. Because traditionally, when people start to have valve control issues, the way that they try to fix it is with more spring. And in my opinion, probably better than 8 out of 10 times, more spring makes it worse. It moves it somewhere else, so it might mask it, and you go, okay, cool, I fixed that problem, but it makes it way worse almost everywhere. So the first thing that we have to understand is that when you get a cam card, it's got specs on it for lift and duration, right? So you look at your cam card and you go, okay, this thing is 260 at 50, and it's installed on 110.
That's a 3/4 race cam.
Yeah, that's our mild 3/4 race. So like just quick math, right? If we do quick math in our head, so 260 degrees installed at 110, that means the intakes valve's got to open 20 before TDC and it's got to close 60 after bottom dead center, right? So if I advance or retard 2 degrees, 4 degrees, whatever, I'm going to move those numbers around. But the reason that we pick numbers like that are because they set up an event where I'm going to have a relationship between what the piston's asking for in terms of demand of airflow and what the cylinder head can supply through the aperture or the some people call it the curtain area when the valve off the seat, right? So we're trying to create a moment in time where we've got the valve a specific distance away from the seat so that we can have the correct amount of airflow supply to the engine. Now, we grind a lobe on the camshaft that tries to achieve that through the mechanical, moving the lifter and then the push rod and through the fulcrum of the rocker arm. And then, okay, a lot of things get lost in translation on the way to the valve. Imagine, for example, what happens to your cam timing when the push rod bends. Well, you just retarded your cam timing. And right. So when the push rod bends, it becomes effectively like a diving board. So now when I was supposed to be opening the valve down here at the bottom, it opens later than it's supposed to, but when it finally gets opening, my push rod starts flinging everything back, and now my valve's open faster and farther than it's supposed to be. And we talk about lofting over the nose and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
We have this specific like frequency in the system that's going on, and we're putting all this energy into our system that's forcing the valve open, forcing the lifter to ride up the nose of the camshaft, rocker arm, all that stuff. So all this kinetic energy is going into the system at a rate of 1/2 mv squared. So the mass of the parts times the square of the velocity. It's that square of the velocity that gets us, because when you double the speed you're moving something, you don't double the energy, you quadruple it. It's 4 times more energy, right?
Yeah.
That means you take your push rod and you wind that thing up and let it flick. Well, all of a sudden, the only thing that you have to counteract all that kinetic energy is the potential energy that we have stored in the valve spring. And if your kinetic energy in the system gets greater than the potential energy that's stored in the valve spring, then you lose control of what's going on, okay? And so what happens is on both the opening side and the closing side of our camshaft, we have to really manage how fast we're inputting or what do I want to say? Like dissolving the energy as we get that valve coming off the seat and coming back to the seat. Now, if you think about a valve spring and you take it and set it on the bench and you just whack it with a ball peen hammer, it will sit there and shake for a while. Okay?
Oscillate, yeah.
When the valve comes down to the seat, valve spring is sitting there oscillating. We can see it with high-speed cameras. We can put load cells under the spring and watch the force. What would blow your mind is to watch the actual valve spring force on the seat when the engine's running. It's not a static number. When I take the valve spring and I put it in my little tester and I pull the handle, I hold it there and I go, okay, that's an inch open. So it's got, whatever, 800 pounds. And then on the seat, it's got 180 pounds. Well, it doesn't have 180 pounds when the engine's running because it comes to the seat with that 180 pounds. And then the spring does this on its own.
Mm.
So if you get that spring doing this big enough and hard enough, you'll actually see the load going up and down, 180, 200, all the way down to 0. You can have no valve spring pressure on the seat because the spring itself is collapsing. So when a guy has problems with his valve train, the first thing he does is go, well, shoot, I need more valve spring.
Yeah.
All that does is bend your diving board more and make it, to get more valve spring force, you end up with a larger diameter wire, or a higher twist rate, or pitch of the coil. So now that spring's got a different kind of personality when it's bouncing on the seat. We've just moved that energy somewhere else in the system.
So if we use your diving board analogy, and I like that, when you go to a heavier spring and the push rod is bending again, you're potentially inducing even more energy into that whole system.
Not potentially, you absolutely are.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
A million times. And like I said, a lot of times, a guy will say, oh, it's floating the valves at 7,200. So I put more spring on it. Now it doesn't do that. Well, guess what? It does it. It just does it somewhere else now. So, for example, you take that, let's go back to our example of 260 degrees of duration. So when I put a cam in the engine to put my degree wheel on it and dial it in, you typically use like little soft checking springs like you would use for a flow bench, right? So you can move the rocker arm and check everything. Okay.
I think you're supposed to, yeah.
Well, let me tell you why you should. So we do that and we'll get our cam timing right, but then you go put real springs in it, you can immediately measure a lot of that bending and deflection. So an engine like my Ford, for example, we intentionally run the piston to valve clearance really tight on that engine. By really tight, what I mean is if I use a checking spring, I'm negative 15 thousandths P to V. In other words, the piston to the valve crash, I have to back the rocker adjuster off 15 thou.
To get it to turn over all the way. Yeah.
When I put the real springs in it, I have 55 thou.
So now, are you
70 if we're counting?
No, we're talking about the motor with 1200 over the nose pressure. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. Yeah.
So do you run like a 1/2 inch push rod in that thing?
I do. I run typically a 1/2 inch on the intake and a 9/16 diameter on the exhaust.
Wow. Okay.
And as those loads go up, those push rods have to get stiffer. The rocker arms have to get stiffer. The bolts that hold the rocker arm into the head have to get stiffer. I mean, so what I was going to get at is we take that 260 cam, right? You put that on your engine with a soft spring and you roll it around with your dial indicator and you do all your stuff and you go, yep, it's 260. Well, first of all, if it's a solid roller cam, you're going to put lash in it. So, rough math, you're going to lose, for every couple thou, maybe two thou or so of lash, you're probably going to lose about a degree. So now if I got 20 thou lash in the thing, that thing's a 250 cam when it's sitting there idling. Okay. Yeah. Now the engine goes up in speed. Remember that 1/2 mv squared starts to work on us, and that velocity squared is getting higher and higher and higher as we're going higher in the RPM range.
Right. So
I put it on my Spintron, and you'll see that you lose 5-6 degrees of duration at idle because of the lash. But at 10,000 RPM, you'll lose another 10, 12, or sometimes 14 degrees of duration because of all the bending and the deflection, which we can measure to 1,000th of an inch with the laser on the Spintron. So you go, well, geez, then I need to put a bigger push rod in this thing and get rid of that. So you do that and you're all happy, high five. You go put the engine on the dyno and it makes less power.
So you've moved it somewhere else, I'm guessing.
Well, now my cam's too big.
Right. Oh, okay.
Right. So over the years, what's happened is we keep putting bigger stuff in the engine until it runs the way we like. We never realized that now I'm at 280 degrees of duration is really acting like 260. So if I make everything infinitely stiff and I put a 280 in there, now the cam's too big and I end up back at a 260. The engine's always going to get what it wants. Whether or not that's what it's getting is a different story. But we can measure it now. And so, years ago, I built this spreadsheet to help me understand the relationship of my cylinder head flow and my engine RPM and volumetric efficiency and size, and you could predict camshaft. Problem is the stupid spreadsheet didn't work. It was always broken. It never predicted the right camshaft. It was always smaller than what my experience told me it had to have to make the engine run right. And then one day on the Spintron looking at it going, wait a minute, I'm losing like 18 degrees here. And I went back to my little spreadsheet and guess what? It was dead on. It was exactly correct for what the engine was actually getting. I just didn't know that. I just had to keep putting a bigger cam until I overcame all that deflection.
So let me ask you a question then. Like I'm astounded those you have a lot of spring pressure, but I don't even think I've actually seen a 9/16 push rod. It's like it's like a socket extension.
Well, so the Pro Mod engine that I'm working on, that I don't know if you've seen that Sorceress, that 84 Hurst Olds that Rod Chickfee has. We use 3/4 inch diameter push rods on that thing.
Oh, Jesus.
So is there a rule of thumb for valve spring pressure to what you would like to see for push rods? And I ask this because I know Rich runs 2 different sizes, intake and exhaust. And then when I had my solid setup, it was 7/16, right, Rich? That's the bigger size you run?
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran 7/16 push rods, but when I went to this hydraulic, I went down to a 3/8.
3/8, yeah.
Okay. And maybe I should go back to 7/16.
Well, so here's what I tell you. It's nearly impossible for you to know without doing Spintron work how much you're losing dynamically while the engine's running. But I can give you an easy free test that anybody can do if you have a dial indicator. All you do is you take your rocker arm and your valve and you put the little lightweight checking springs for the flow bench on there, bolt everything together, put your indicator up at the top of your retainer, and then roll the engine around and see how much lift you get.
Okay.
Now, the lift you get is probably not going to be what your cam card says you were supposed to get, because there's so many things where you can lose a few thou here and there just in the geometry of push rod angle and adjuster angle and rocker arm and all that stuff. But don't worry about that. You get what you get, right? So what you're going to do is I'm going to keep the math easy. Let's say that I got 1 inch of lift with my soft spring. When you put the real spring in there, do the test over again and look at how much you lose. So like I told you, on my Ford, we lose 70 thousandths. But if you lost, let's say that with my soft spring, I had 1 inch and now I got 950, I lost 50 thousandths of an inch. So you take a loss that you had and divide it into your spring pressure to give you a total system stiffness. So let's say that my springs are 1,000 pounds of load over the nose and I lost 50 thousandths. So 1,000 divided by 0.050 is 20,000. So I can put a number on the stiffness of my system now at 20,000 pounds per inch. Okay, so now what you can do is you can change your push rod and do the test over again and go, wow, I went from 20 to now I'm 24,000 pounds per inch. Or, in other words, you're going to find a point where the returns are diminishing. I went from a 5/16 to a 3/8 and it was awesome. I went from a 3/8 to 7/16 and it was kind of cool. But when I went from a 7/16 to a 1/2 inch, it didn't really change very much. Well, that just tells you that now the push rod is kind of in the sweet spot and there's no gain to keep going up from there. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So
I'm going to have to come back. I'm going to have to watch this
rewatch
podcast
that
again.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you join the Brotherhood, you'll
just saying,
there's some great videos on there that, and some videos of on the Spintron where you see all the stuff Ben's talking about, where it comes off the nose and doesn't land, or just before the bottom. It's not. Yeah, there's some pretty wild videos out there. The slow motion cameras and what Ben can record and show in data is pretty amazing. So why don't we do this? Why don't we to help some of our, because we might have lost some of our IQ there trying to figure some of that.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I think why don't we talk about your strategy for the car that you're building for a drag and drive, and talk a little bit about the spring pressure, and then we should talk clutch management as well.
So it doesn't end up being a 5-hour podcast, is what you're saying, right?
Well, I was trying to get us
on track. Yeah. So Robbie Blankenship, the guy that I build the Ford engines for, he and I started a company together about 6 or 8 months ago called 10K Technologies, because we believe life starts at 10,000, right? So everything we do is revolving around this, basically our mission statement is to discover, design, and develop high-end products for high-end people and racers that care about premium and not price. We want stuff that works good because that's the stuff we'd want to use. I'm tired of buying junk that I got to sand on, grind on, refit, remake, then it breaks anyway. So with EFI University's capabilities to do R&D, we learn and we design and we develop so many cool things that I can't sell because it puts bias in the school, right? Like, I don't want you to come to my school to learn fuel injection. And by the way, let me sell you my favorite brand of computer, right? So I just don't feel right about that. So we started 10K Technologies to be able to monetize some of the things that we learn. So we decided that, hey, we should do something fun as a project to kind of help us with marketing the business. And as it turns out, I have a young daughter, Allie, who's totally just drunk on drag racing. And in my family, we have a tradition where we told our girls that when they got to, it was supposed to be 16 for my older daughter, Natalie, but that was the COVID year. And then 2021 just got wrecked. But anyway, our family deal is you can pick a parent, mom or dad, and you can pick a place anywhere on the planet, and you can go on a trip after you turn 16. And so Natalie, of course, being the romantic soul she is, wants to go to France and Paris. And okay, cool, you and mom are going to do that. If you ask Allie what she wants to do, no question about it, I want to do drag week with dad. That's her life goal, is I want to do drag week. She reads
awesome.
You are winning as a parent.
Seriously, bro. Like, yeah.
Yeah. You are winning as a father.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So Robbie has a boy, Chase, who's a little bit younger than Allie. And so we started talking about it. And we're like, well, what if we build a car for drag week? And me and Allie can go do it for a year or two. And then when we're done, you guys can take the car and you and Chase can go do it for a year or two. And so that's what we did. But we didn't want to do just like some plain Jane kind of, let's do a Fox body with a single turbo LS. And look, no offense to somebody who's driving one of those. They're cool, they're fast, and all that, but it's not that inspiring, So we bought a 66 Mustang Fastback, and it's a beautiful car, and we're going to basically revamp everything in the car. But one of the projects that we've done a lot of work with 10K Technologies is the new Ford 7.3 liter Godzilla platform. Mm. So we have a ton of money invested in that platform. So we decided we need to put one of those with a stick shift in this car and go do drag week with it. So that's
my face hurts with all this smiling.
Until he's kicking our butt with an NA.
I don't. 20 pounds of boost won't be enough for that NA motor. Damn it.
I don't know that our first time out will do that, so I wouldn't worry too much, fellas. But so we're going to use a Tremec Magnum transmission and lots and lots of RPM. But my goal is this:
You'll have to get a face-plated one for the RPM you're going to run.
Obviously, yeah, no.
Well, okay. All right.
Yeah, so actually, on the same page. Oh yeah, no, actually, Jonathan at TIC is going to build the transmission for us. We've kind of already been talking to them about building the trans, and the attractive thing is the same thing everybody wants. I didn't want to have to do a type gear vendors type thing, and and all that. And with a higher RPM engine like this, you need a ton of rear end ratio. And so, I wanted the low kind of first gear, but then I don't want to be annoyed trying to go 75 miles an hour down the freeway and turn in $4,000 either. So that transmission just makes sense.
And if I can add something, and Rich and I have both done this, the 5/6 split is a little weird, but you're going to love it. Have him put the 0.5 6 gear in it, not the 0.68 that it comes with.
Yep. Okay. I think there was some discussion about that.
Yeah, we talked a bit about that.
Yep.
Sorry.
So my stated goal is this. I told you that I really feel like 90% of the engines we work on are just way oversprung. One of the projects that 10K Technology has been working on for the last year and a half or so is we have our own proprietary line of valve springs. And they're actually made by Richard Childress at Childress RCR, ECR engines. We have an exclusive arrangement with them that the stuff that they design and develop for their cup stuff is one thing, but then they wanted a way to use their cup technology and be able to generate more revenue to pay for all the, overhead machinery that they have. What they lack though is infrastructure. They didn't have a way to test and design and develop springs other than for their NASCAR stuff because that keeps them so busy. And so we had a relationship with them already. And since we have a Spintron and we have all the ability to do the testing, we, basically proposed to them, like, why don't you design and develop springs for our applications? We will do all the long-term Spintron testing, and then we'll do the sales and marketing and kind of infrastructure support that you guys don't have. And so that worked out great. So we have a specific valve spring for naturally aspirated drag week style drag and drive type events that we're in the product sort of stages of product development right now. But here's my stated goal. I'm going to put a ton of pressure on myself. I'm just going to say it right now, and then if might have to eat my words. But what we want to do is we want to show up on the first day, and of course we're going to do a YouTube channel build out for all this stuff and whatever. But I'm going to seal the valve covers on the first day. Solid roller. We'll do more than 9,000 RPM the whole week and never open the valve covers. And so it'll be just like Bill, except hopefully I don't have a 1/4 inch of lash at the end.
Hey Ben.
Yeah.
Can we be friends? You and me?
We might. Yeah. We might be able to help you. So yeah, it's going to be fun. We have a Godzilla block already cut up and a mandrel made and a plate to adapt the Godzilla platform to our Spintron. And so we're really close to starting. I went to Comp Cams and I asked them early this year, like January, February, to do some camshafts for us. The problem is they didn't have cores. And I don't know how much you guys know about camshaft cores, but there's lots of different materials they're made out of.
Yeah.
The typical materials, 5150, 5140, that chilled iron stuff, or 8620, 9310. The problem with those types of cores is that they're case hardened. So they harden from the outside in. And so they only get about 100, maybe 150 thousandths below the surface of hardening. When you're doing a lot of camshaft development, like on the Spintron or even on the dyno, you're often wanting to regrind and try this lobe separation or that degree duration or this lift or whatever.
Are you going to say tool steel?
I was going to say tool steel. Yeah.
Yes.
Tool steel is better for that application because it's hardened all the way through. So the problem is to get them to make them, we had to order 10 of them. Yeah. And they're about, I don't know, $1,300 or $1,400 each. So it's a significant investment that we had to make to get tool steel camshafts. But I now have 4 complete camshafts in my building along with the Spintron block, and we're ready to go with the Godzilla platform. So we will have Godzilla specific cam profiles and valve spring and retainer packages for guys that want to do a lot of RPM, but also want low maintenance on a solid roller drag and drive type event. So I very well could be eating crow a year and a half from now and all my stuff blew up. But here's the deal. The NASCAR Cup guys, they do 9,000 and 10,000 RPM for hours and hours and hours on end, and none of their stuff blows up. So there's no reason we can't replicate that performance. So my goal is to go do drag week without taking the valve covers off in a stick shift, 1,000 plus RPM Godzilla. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. I want to sneak in a question from the audience because it kind of goes with what you're saying here.
There's an audience?
Well, not live. Not live.
There might be.
These were people we paid to ask questions.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
So bore and stroke ratio, is a bigger bore, shorter stroke better for drag racing? Now, I know the Godzilla motor is pretty big. 7.3 is what? 430,
445 inches.
Yeah. And so I guess just answer that, like bore and stroke. I mean, I've always thought that in a higher RPM motor, you don't want a lot of stroke. You probably want less stroke, just because shit's slinging around so fast.
Well, so what it really comes down to, and everything I say on your podcast is worth exactly what you paid for me to be here. So that's not
a lot.
All just opinion. These are just my opinion, based on some math and science and years of working on engines. But I'm a believer that in drag racing specifically, more RPM always helps. So for example, if you had 2 guys with cars that weighed the same and both engines made the same power, one makes 1,000 horsepower at 8,000 RPMs and one makes 1,000 horsepower at 10,000 RPMs, I would bet you that all things being equal, gear ratios being accommodated for and all that, the 10,000 RPM car wins every time. Largely because even though the power is the same, the frequency of how many times you're getting a power pulse to the drive line, the differential, the tires, all that stuff. Isaac Newton said an object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion, well, it tends to stay in motion. So every time you fire a piston and you accelerate that crankshaft, your input shaft of the transmission, your drive shaft, your tires, it speeds up. But then it immediately starts slowing down again until you hit it with the next fire. So if I hit it more times than the 1,320 feet, more often than not, you're going to go faster. That's why every professional level, not budget limited racing program does lots and lots of RPM, which is exactly why we chase more RPM on our program. So that said, being able to do a lot of RPM primarily is dictated by how much airflow supply you have. You've got to have the cylinder head and induction system to do it. But then it comes down to piston speed. When the piston speed moves, when the piston moves away from top dead center, that's what's creating the demand for airflow. You could open the valve all you want. If you don't move the piston, air doesn't move through the head. So it is absolutely tied to piston motion. And so the faster.
No, sorry. Is that also velocity? The quicker the velocity, the harder the pull of air, right?
Well, yes, to a point. So what happens is if your piston velocity gets too high, you can sonic choke the port. You're asking for air to move through the port faster than it can be supplied. So there are limits on what we want for maximum piston speed as an average piston speed. You take your stroke times the RPM you want to run and divide by 6 is easy math to get a mean average piston speed. So when you start getting into numbers that are 5,000 and 6,000 feet per minute and above, it gets really difficult for the cylinder head to supply that airflow. So what that means is for a given RPM range, we start with, well, what's the stroke got to be to target a piston speed range? And so for me, an all-out drag race type engine that does not have to ride around on the street, I'm usually looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of about 6,000 feet per minute. And I'm fully aware that there's probably going to be listeners or watchers or people that say, this guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about. I totally disagree. That's cool. But the stuff that we do is where we start is 6,000 feet per minute. That's not a limit. That's just what we're looking for. As you go above that, you start getting other issues besides the sonic flow, which would be things like wrist pin integrity, piston pin box integrity, on and on and on. We don't want to go down the rabbit hole there. But the reason that is that for a given size of displacement in your dragway trim, you got to be 430 inches. Well, the Godzilla is already above 430 inches. So we have to get it down. And it's not very easy to put bore back in and shrink the bore. So we're going to take stroke out of it. I'm also a believer that a larger bore to stroke ratio is advantageous in a drag race application where you have high piston speed, because it allows you to A, have a larger valve, and B, have more room between the valve and the side of the cylinder bore so it's not so shrouded. So I would way rather have a larger bore than stroke in a drag race application every single time.
Rich has a great big bore in his motor.
I bet. It's a Pontiac, yeah.
No, for real. Like you're like 4.5, aren't you, Rich?
It's 4.350 bore and stroke.
Yeah, that's
so square.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's square.
Yeah. So, doing that though, that 4.350 stroke, in my opinion, really limits the maximum RPM that you could expect that engine to see. I mean, first of all, you have a ton of inertial loads slinging all that stuff around in there, but you reach your maximum, if you have a target, not my 6,000 foot per minute thing, right? Let me see here what I do with my phone. Hang on a second, fellas. Well,
do you need a calculator?
Yeah, you got one?
I do.
Do 36,000 divided by 4.3.
Okay, 36,000 divided by what?
4.35.
We get 8,275.
So that would be the maximum RPM I would expect for that engine.
Oh, Rich, you got lots of room to go, buddy.
Yeah, easy. I'm not saying the rod bolts can take that, but what it means is you're probably never going to be successful at 10,000 RPM with an engine like that.
So on mine, I would just do it by 4.125.
Yep. So you'll have the same experience. You're going to see that your piston speed is relatively low. So you do 4.125 times whatever your red line is divided by 6. That'll give you your mean average piston speed.
Okay, so I got the red line there. Take that divided by what?
So what's your red line going to be?
87.27. God, so when I money shifted, I'm not even close to this. We're in good shape.
So that number would give you the RPM where your piston's average speed is 6,000 feet per minute. So let's see what your normal piston speed would be at your normal RPM where you're shifting at.
So that's 7,000.
Okay, so 7,000 times your stroke.
Times 4.125.
And then divide by 6.
Divide by 6. That's 4,812.5.
So your 4,800-ish average piston speed. That's really good. So like for a regular, never going to race street car, you're going to be 3,000-ish, 3,500 feet per minute. And for an all-out, money's no object, let's go as fast as we can, you're at 6,000. So that, kind of 4,500 to 5,000, 5,500 range is pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a happy accident for me.
That's right. That's right.
So let's
And again, these aren't hard limits, but they're how I come up with my engine packages. So like
Okay.
drag week Godzilla has to be 430 inches, right? So we're going to end up with the stock bore is 4,220. We'll be 30 over at 4,250.
Oh, so you're so sorry to interrupt, but you're going because of the small block, big block rule. You want to be in the small block class. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
stroke
absolutely.
it. Okay,
Yep.
I understand.
Yep, absolutely.
I thought you were just doing it to achieve this magical number, but now
Nope.
it makes sense.
Nope. We just had to make sure that we could have a stroke that would be small enough to fit us into the engine displacement cap, but also fit within our 6,000 foot per minute limitation of what kind of RPM we want to do. So
Perfect. Okay.
you take let's say my stroke's 3,780 at 9,000 RPM. What does that give me for piston speed?
Okay.
0.78 times 9,000, then divide by 6.
Hold on. Say it again. Sorry.
3.78.
3.78 times
9,000.
9,000.
And then divide by 6.
5670.
Just lucky.
God, you're good.
yeah.
So I'm looking for a big bore short stroke, but I don't want an ultra stroke because in this case I can't get the cubic inches. And so in a class where you're cubic inch limited, you want to run all the cubic inches. In a class where weight per cubic inch, then you got to work out what size engine do I want versus how much the car's got to weigh and where's my sweet spot.
Got it. Okay.
So what interests me too is, do you think, because most of the time you're playing a high RPM, you're doing all your testing up there, do you foresee any issues where you're going to be cruising at 2,300 RPM for hours? From your testing, do you think you're going to see any issues based off of that?
Valvetrain wise, no way. Walk in the park.
Yeah.
No. The more difficult thing is developing an induction package that will let me run the smallest cam possible to get to the RPMs I want to get to. Because when the camshaft gets really big, it really hurts the low speed performance of the engine.
Yeah.
Right.
So for example, I know we really briefly mentioned like analysis. And one of the challenges to low engine speeds is that you have such a long period of time from the spark initiation at the spark plug to when you reach the crank angle where you want to have your mixture doing its job, right? Where you're putting pressure on the cylinder and moving down. Because your cranks is moving so slow, let's just use a number, 2,500 RPM, right? Your crankshaft's moving so slowly from the time you light the spark plug to when think about how fast the flame burns.
Yeah.
Reach maximum cylinder pressure way too soon. And so you end up with really retarded ignition timing at low engine speeds there. And that gets harder and harder to manage as the engine speed gets lower and lower. But what happens is when you have a real giant camshaft where the intake and the exhaust valves are both open at the same time, you're getting a bunch of unwanted natural EGR in there. Mm-hmm. The exhaust is diluting your intake charge because you don't have enough speed of the incoming air column at low RPM to kind of flush it out. So without the ability to do in-cylinder combustion analysis, which we have, it's almost impossible for you to figure out the right ignition timing for the engine. But when you do have it, it's shocking. It's mind-blowing just how much advance the engine actually wants there. An example, the other day I was working on an engine with a big camshaft. At 3,500 RPM, I had as much timing in it as I would ever have dared with dyno only. And I just, it's the best you can do, reading spark plugs, looking at all the stuff, With the combustion analysis, I was able to treat it rather than one 8-cylinder engine. I treated it like 8 individual 1-cylinder engines and gave each one of them their own ignition timing curve and tune-up. The engine picked up 39 foot-pounds of torque at that RPM.
Jeez.
God, Ben, we're gonna be such good friends, you and me.
You think about doing that at each RPM range and the ability on especially a drag and drive project where we're greedy. We down the road at 2,000 RPM in high gear, and I want to go, peak power at 88 or 9,000 and go to 9,500 when I make my shift. Like I want it all. So unfortunately, to get it all, you have to be much more sophisticated in the way you approach a program like that.
So what you described, if you didn't have that and you had all this exhaust gas recirculation, would it turn your intake black?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Never seen that before.
Weird, right?
And the other interesting part with the timing that you just mentioned is when I was running an extra 15 degrees that I didn't know I was running. So I'm running at like 55 degrees driving down the road instead of running 40 degrees.
Probably ran pretty good.
It ran really good. And I learned there that I'm like, I was way under timing while I'm running at 1700 RPM. And you'd think 1700 RPM, if you go back to a distributor with weights and vacuum advance, you would probably never run that much timing. But
yeah, to a lot of guys, running down there and having 38 or 40 or 45 degrees of ignition, that sounds like a lot. And they're surprised when I tell them, the thing probably wants like 65 degrees.
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I run 38 to 40 cruising down the highway on mine.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised if if it would not want more than that. Don't get me wrong, full disclaimer, I'm not telling everybody to run out and jam more timing in your engine.
No.
More times than not, at low throttle angles where you have high manifold vacuum, they need way more timing than you would ever think.
Now, so high manifold vacuum is going to indicate low load.
Correct.
But how much is that timing value going to be affected by the quality of fuel, the octane rating of the fuel?
Okay, that's
if you're running Q16, you probably can't even detonate that if you tried. Just about, I bet.
You almost can't. It is the most ridiculously good, safe fuel. So, there are a lot of questions that I have about that, Bill. In fact, there are 5-gallon containers of different types of fuel sitting outside my dyno cell right now that the intention last week was to test before we chainsawed the wall in half with the little trigger wheel.
Yeah, the Bob Vila effect.
Yes, exactly. Specifically, that was a happy mistake. We'll make a little tree there. Specifically though, that's one of the questions that I want to answer is, for a given set of conditions that the engine's operating in, barometric pressure, temperature, and humidity, let's say, how much does you mentioned octane, I hate that word, I'm not going to use that. How much does the vapor pressure of the fuel matter? So one of the things that we talk a lot about in our training classes is understanding the fuel type, reading the spec sheets and understanding what that means for application. Why do I want, what's the difference between C16 and Q16? What application was C16 good at and what application would C16 be bad at? Well, C16 is a really terrible fuel for something like a drag race engine where you chill the water before a run and then you do 10,000 plus RPM, right? Terrible for that because it's really low vapor pressure and really high distillation temperature numbers. So what that means is it takes a lot of temperature to convert C16 from a liquid to a vapor form. And if you don't get it into a vapor form, it doesn't work well. So that's exactly why when you go to the racetrack and you see guys going down the track and their gas car looks like it's a diesel because there's black smoke rolling out the back.
Like mine.
That's telling you it's not because you're too rich. It's because you're having unburned hydrocarbons. You're having incomplete combustion happening because the fuel is not completely vaporizing before you get it all in there. You know what I mean? So you change from C16 to Q16, which has not quite double, but probably 60% more vapor pressure and correspondingly lower distillation temperatures. It doesn't take as much heat to make that fuel vaporize. And so that cleans the spark plugs up. It cleans the pipe, goes down the track with all that fuel. C16 is not a bad fuel. It's just being used in the wrong application. And so we look at all these different fuels and the vapor pressures, distillation curves, stoichiometric ratios, specific gravities, and we teach the guys that come to our tuning school about how to choose the right fuel for the right application as part of that process.
I can already see that we're going to need to have you as a repeat offender on our podcast,
or we're going to have to go to school and get educated.
Yeah. So this is very, so Rich and I both run C16 or a very close variant of that. I get the Q16 thing, but I guess the pot life of it is pretty short, and that doesn't work for myself. I know probably for Rich as well, because I tend to have fuel left over, and I sometimes use the fuel from last season this season, and with Q, I don't think that'll work because
one of the problems with Q and other oxygenated fuels is they have so many light aromatics blended in them to make them have more volatility, lower vapor or higher vapor pressure, lower distillation temperatures,
more awesomeness.
More awesomeness. Yeah. It's expensive to go fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. But there are other fuels that you could be looking at to solve that issue than C16. But we could spend all night talking about that. So we can maybe either do another version of the podcast where we just talk about that stuff, or we can talk about it offline. But there's you know, I have the same problem with guys that buy avgas to put in their racing engine, right? Like,
no. That's
it's
super
the same
old school.
thing.
Well, that's
It's
the double
because
camel hump head thing.
it totally is, right? And the reality is people are going, yeah, but it's high octane. I'm like, you don't understand. Octane has nothing to do with it. You know, you look at the difference in volatility between C16 and C45. C45 has about 10 psi of vapor pressure as opposed to 2 psi for C16. In order to get C16 to begin to convert from liquid to vapor, the initial boiling point, it's probably something like, I don't know, 180 degrees or something like that. It's like 84 degrees for C45. So C45 is blended with tons of light aromatics with ultra fast burn speed that's specifically designed for high compression ratio, high RPM engines. So I run C16 on engines that are 18-to-1 compression ratio.
Diesels, you mean?
Yeah, well, almost, yeah. The difference is it's only got about 105 octane. And so you go, well, then if that's the case, it must not be about octane. The problem with octane is there's only a couple of tests that they have to measure it. So you have RON and MON. You guys are familiar?
Yep.
You take the average RON or the RON and the MON, add them together, and then divide by 2, you get the AKI or the anti-knock index, or what we call the average, you know, between RON and MON. Well, here's the problem. The laboratory tests that they use to perform the RON measurement and the MON measurement are nothing at all like the type of engines that you and I run this fuel in. They're low RPM, they're specified temperatures and pressures, right? So it's literally just the definition of the fuel's resistance to knock under lab conditions in a single cylinder fixed compression ratio engine. So what does that have to do with what we do? Nothing. And so I don't even look at the octane rating of a race fuel when I'm ordering it for a particular application. I'm looking at, you know, again, we're looking at the specific gravity, the vapor pressure, the distillation temperatures, and the curve, how steep the slope of distillation is. Some fuels take a lot of temperature to initially boil, but once they do, it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. They go really fast from there. Other fuels have a really flat curve where it doesn't take as much temperature, but it's really linear. More temperature is more distillation. And so there are applications, you know, you think about, take a big block Chevy that's in a dragster, it only has to run for 7 seconds, but then you take that engine out and you sell the dragster and you put it in an offshore power boat. It makes the same power, the same number of BTUs, the same amount of heat, but it might have to run for an hour. So the operating conditions of that engine are different. Therefore, it needs a different behaving fuel. So there's a lot of that stuff that we need to understand and investigate before we say, well, you know, Rich Guido won last week and he had C16, so I guess that's what I need. You know, unfortunately, that's what happens a lot in racing, though.
We should probably back out of this rabbit hole because it legitimately could be a whole podcast.
Sorry, this is my life every day.
This is awesome, Ben. Like, yeah, my IQ is feeling smaller and smaller.
So
that was not my intention.
Let's talk about why don't we move into clutches and
so
strategy around clutch management. I know I sent you one of mine that we still got to kind of go over.
Yep.
But let's talk about clutch slippage off the line, lockup,
launch RPM.
Why don't we talk? I mean, we might as well use Robbie's car.
So this is one of those things where there's a million variables. So I also had a clutch car before I started working on Robbie's. I had a Fox body Mustang with a high RPM naturally aspirated LS engine with a Liberty 5-speed, and I ran that next gen Black Magic clutch, same exact one you have, I think, in your car, Rich. I don't remember if mine was the same diameter as yours, but same clutch. So 3-finger adjustable clutch. And I tend to be a nerd. I'm a math guy. So I generated a spreadsheet for mine, and we do this for Robbie's car as well. And so what I did was I took the clutch dyno sheet that specifies how much force you get for turning the base screws. So quarter turn is this, half a turn is that, you know, whatever. So the base amount of base spring in your clutch is always linear. It is not affected by RPM or anything else. It's literal just force applied is the displacement of the spring. So I think it's F equals KD or something like that. The spring rate versus the distance that you screw it in. And so On top of that, then you also have the levers, which are exponentially more force generated with RPM. And so when they dyno the clutch, they spin it at various RPMs, and they give you a map of basically this much weight of grams of weight on the clutch arms will generate this much force. So here's the trouble. You need to leave the starting line, and you've got a few knobs that we can turn when we leave the starting line. The only thing the clutch knows, okay, is you have torque from the engine coming in, and then you have the resistance of that torque on the other side of the clutch. That's your transmission ratio, your differential ratio, the radius of your wheel or tire, and the weight of the vehicle. Okay.
And the traction available.
Well, I'm starting from, let's assume we don't have a traction problem, right?
Okay.
We'll get into reading the track here in just a minute. So for now, if my wheel was 100% traction on the ground, I got the weight of the vehicle and I got, gear ratios to move.
Yep.
So what we typically try to do is we try to come up with a total amount of clutch force that we're leaving the starting line with. So the knobs that I have to turn are my RPM that I leave the starting line, because that affects my lever, the amount of grams of weight that I hang on the lever, and how much base that I start with. So for example, in my spreadsheet, I can drop in my starting line RPM. Let's say for us, that's typically between 64 and 6,800 RPM. And so when we leave at 6,400 RPM, we get less total clutch force than we would if we left at 6,800 RPM, simply because you have more counterweight leverage there. So what we do is we look in our data log, and I look at the engine speed and I look at the drive shaft speed in low gear and then in all the gear changes, but specifically when I go into high gear. When I get into high gear, I'm 1-to-1. So now it's just engine torque versus differential ratio. My transmission is out of the equation at this point. So what I'm looking for is what RPM in high gear did it lock up? Meaning, when did the drive shaft and the engine speed become the same? That way I have no clutch slip or very little clutch slip, okay? If I got 1 or 2% there, I'm going to hang some more counterweight on it or some base or whatever to increase the clutch force there.
And that's because fourth gear or high gear is the highest load on the clutch, correct?
Well, yes, essentially, yes. As you're taking ratio out of the transmission, you're making the clutch's job harder. Ratio is leverage.
Okay.
Right? So if I got 100 foot-pounds going into the clutch and I got a 2-to-1 gear ratio, well, it's like having 200 foot-pounds to move the car. If I change my gear ratio from 2-to-1 to 1.5-to-1, I gave up a bunch of leverage from the ratio. So now the clutch has got to be able to clamp and overcome that leverage. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. I should say the loss of leverage. So what we try to do is we want to have enough clutch so that when I get into high gear, the clutch doesn't slip. But I don't want, so I'll look at, for example, when I leave the starting line, I'm 6,400 RPM and I got, let's just use numbers, 3 turns of base and 30 grams of counterweight. So in my spreadsheet, I look up how much force is 3 turns of base and 6,400 RPMs times 30 grams of counterweight. And I'll get a number for total force. Let's say that's 850 total pounds. So that means I got 850 pounds of force that the clutch can provide. So you multiply that 850 pounds of force through the first gear ratio. Let's say that's 2,750. So now that comes out to whatever. Then I multiply that times my differential ratio, and that might be a 538 or a 550. And then I divide that by the radius from the center line of the axle to the ground, however tall your tire is, right? So that gives me a total amount of force available to make the car move. Remember, it's not engine torque, because if I've got, let's just say I got 1,000 pounds of torque, but my clutch can only give me 850 pounds of clamping force, you're going to get slip. And that's what we want, because I can't apply all the engine torque directly to the tire. I'm going to spin the tire. So once we have a mathematical number to apply to that, I go out and I make a test run and I say, did the car leave the way I want it to or not? If it bogs, then I need to leave at a higher RPM, or, I need to loosen the clutch up. So I either got to apply more engine torque or I got to let the clutch loosen up a little bit. So the trick is, do I do that with base or counterweight? Well, we play this game all the time where I'm going, all right, let me look at the total clutch force I had. And let's say it was 850 pounds on the starting line. That was 6,400 RPM and 3 turns of base and 30 grams of counterweight. Well, when I go look at what I did in high gear, I go, well, shoot, at 9,000 RPM, where the engine actually locked up the drive shaft to the engine, by that RPM, I might have had 1,400 pounds of clutch force. I still had my same amount of base, but my exponential increase from 6,400 to 9,000 added all this extra weight from the counterweight. Still with me so far?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Okay, so now what I do is I break them up into percentages. When I was on the starting line, I had 850 pounds of total clutch force, and maybe 61% of that value came from my base, and 39% of that came from my counterweight. But now at 9,000 RPM, and I got 1,400 pounds of force, 73% of that is because of my counterweight. 27 is from my base, right? So I'm just making these numbers up as I go here. I'm not giving you real numbers, but you
no, I totally follow you. Yeah.
Okay. So you can see how that would work. So now what I do is okay, I'm happy with how it locked up in high gear, but I need to do something about the starting line. And so now I got knobs that I can turn. I can add base, I can add counterweight, I can take base or counterweight away, or I can go up or down in the RPMs. So now the way that we do this is we tend to leave the base alone. We have it set relatively low. Let's say I got 3 turns and my 30 grams of counterweight. And I go, okay.
Hey, Rich, tell them how many turns of base you have in.
Well, I got like half a turn, but it's somewhat irrelevant, right?
It is, because your spring rate and all that's going to be different than mine. And and right now I'm just making up numbers anyway, right?
Sure, fair enough.
So like our tune-up that we won Norwalk or let's see, Michigan or whatever, the second to last race of the year, I think we had a turn and a half of base and 37 grams in it. But really those numbers are irrelevant to you because your lever force and your base springs are different than mine. But what we would typically do first is to get in the window of operation is, look, you can't be blowing the tire off and you can't be bogging the engine. So we're going to move big chunks. I'm going to do a half a turn or a full turn of base, tighter or looser, depending on what the car did. If it blew the tires off, I'm going to take base away. The base is what tends to shock the tire, right? The counterweight doesn't come in until later. If it sticks the tire, I might add some base. Or if I think the base is good, I might add some RPM to get more counterweight. The problem is if you just do it with RPM all the time, your counterweight tends to come in like a sledgehammer. And when that happens, the car will tend to hop a lot. It'll initially hook, and then the back end comes up and it unloads the tire, and then it loads and unloads. And you can see it in your graph. It looks real choppy at the beginning of the run. Some guys actually slip their clutch with mechanical hydraulic devices to prevent some of that.
Or electro hydraulic devices.
Yeah, electro hydraulic. Yeah. So I did the exact same thing in my Mustang, except I used an air cylinder. So I had a CO2 bottle and an air cylinder. It was like a ram.
Yeah.
I would hold the button down. I push the clutch to the floor. The ram would punch out, and I could take my foot off. And then when I let go of the button, I had the ECU time how long that would take to fully release the clutch. So that's why I was excited when I saw yours, because I'm like, dude, that's so cool. He's got an app for it, and it's hydraulic. That's awesome. So I'm going to be a customer. I'm going to buy one from you for our driving car, because that works, right? But back to the race scenario, we got to make big swings to get it in the window. Once we have it in the window, I don't make changes really anymore for base or counterweight. I use the RPM. And so what I did is I put a knob on the dash that the driver can't reach. And so when we go, I'm looking at the conditions of the starting line. I'm looking at what the last 5 cars in my lane did. I'm looking at where the sun is on the track. I'm looking at where the last guy dragged through the water box. I'm looking where the rubber, where the groove is and all that. And if I decide that we're set up too soft, I open the door of the car, I reach in and I'll click up. Every one click is another 100 RPM of leave on the starting line. And so we've got a whole spreadsheet that tells me how much clutch force that gives me if I do that. Because remember, it's 2-dimensional, right? Like it's more engine power, but it's also more clutch force.
So if I'm understanding, I was thinking about this today. So as you increase the RPM, you're increasing the base pressure, but it's going to hit the clutch a little harder. I'm sorry, counterweight. Yeah, that's
yes,
right.
That's right. So the idea is that if I do that, if the initial release of the clutch, because my base force is the same, I'm going to blast the tire. I'm using the base to kind of like squeeze the clutch against the tire, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
That's why my base pressure is relatively low. I can have 9 turns of base in my clutch. We're leaving on 1.5 or 2 most of the time. And so the base is like that big old giant sledgehammer, the initial shock to the clutch. So if I can leave that loose and roll into it and then progressively add counterweight to lock it up, that tends to work really good for our program. That also coincidentally worked pretty good in my Mustang. That tends to work pretty good when I worked in pro stock and we were racing lots of, you got a lot of tire and not a lot of engine. A pro stock engine's pretty powerful, but you got a ton of tire in a lightweight car. So The program that you use has a lot to do with how much tire you have, what the car weighs, how much ratio you've got, and what your conditions are. There's no right answer that anybody can give you without data. And so for me, everything is about the data. How long did it take the clutch to lock up? What was my drive shaft speed at a quarter of a second, a half a second, 3/4 of a second into the run? And then we can see whether it needs more initial hit, that's base, or whether it needs more hit after the tire started to wind up and then unwind. And, and again, difference between a radial and a bias ply, the way you treat the clutch is different there, so really it's a matter of playing with your 3 knobs. I got base, I got counterweight, and I got RPM. And I can't tell you what the right number is for you, but here's what I'll tell you. The secret is every time you make a gear ratio change, you're going to have to change your clutch program as well. So like for us with a naturally aspirated car, we live and die with the weather station. If we're going into the 3rd round and, we went from 103 to 103.5 air correction because it got humid or temperature or whatever, my engine simply just loses power. I can't do anything about it. You can change it by regulating boost. Well, when I lose power, I'm going to make up for that by putting more gear ratio in the transmission. When I do that, I just change the behavior of the clutch. So now I've got to correspondingly take, some of that force away from the clutch. If I put more ratio in, it makes the clutch easier to do its job. So I got to take clutch out of it. And that's typically going to be base and counterweight.
So you mentioned something that is in one of our questions and has been on the top of my mind and Rich's too. So really, what would be the difference in clutch tune-up from a bias ply going to a radial? Because it looks like we're both, I'm almost involuntarily doing it and Rich is voluntarily doing it.
So the first thing I'll tell you is full disclaimer, I'm not the expert on any subject on anything, especially when it comes to like clutch tuning a radial versus a bias ply. But again, I'm a firm believer that the data leads you to the answer. And so really what it comes down to with a radial tire is you got to hit it as hard as the tire will let you and don't let up. But the problem is, what I'm going to say, if you go over the edge, you're done. Like the radial tire does not spin and then hook, whereas the bias ply tends to be way more forgiving.
Yeah.
So, we talk about the hook. When we look at data, if you look at your drive shaft curve, it'll be 0 and then you let the clutch out and drive shaft will come up and then it'll hook and then it'll go. We call that little area of the hook. What you're really seeing there, you got to remember, you're looking at drive shaft speed, not wheel speed.
Right.
What you're really seeing there is when you look at slow motion video of the tire and it wrinkles, the pulling the drive shaft down, we're winding the tire up so the drive shaft's going up. Then the tire hooks and it starts to unwind and like spring the car forward is where it drags that thing back down. You don't see that nearly as much in a radial tire car. And so really the right answer for you is the one that makes your G meter go up the best. I can't tell you need more base and he needs more counterweight because your car is different. Your wheelbase is longer. Your shock travel is different. Your gear ratios are different, right? Like there's no easy answer to tell you do this and you're going to go fast. But if you follow the data, if you told me I could have a V300 data logger with 72 different sensors, but you're only allowed to look at one of them, I'd want to look at the G meter. Any change you make that makes the G meter go up is a positive change in drag racing. That's what you're looking for. So,
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like the definition of drag racing is a contest of acceleration. And since the G meter measures acceleration, it's kind of the only thing that matters.
Rich, do you have a G meter in your car?
Nope, Matt and I were just talking about putting one in though.
Yeah.
I mean, my draggy gives G's,
Yeah.
and you can definitely see on a good run compared to a not good run the difference in the G's.
So I'll tell you how I do that real quick. So Bill, you brought up a really good thing about traction. And so I start out with the assumption that I have a perfect vehicle that has perfect traction. And so I have believe it or not, I have a spreadsheet, anonymous. But with this spreadsheet, what I do is I put in all the gear ratios in the vehicle and I put in my tire diameter. Okay, so I've got first, second, third, fourth, and fifth gear. I have my differential ratio. I got the tire diameter. And then what I do is I put in like what RPMs I want to have minimum and maximum shift points and all that. And then what I do in the spreadsheet is I take my dyno sheet from the engine dyno and I plot out the torque curve across the RPM range. And so then what I take is I take my spreadsheet and I have it go, okay, you're going to take your starting line ratio. And I know you guys had a question about starting line ratio. So my starting line ratio is transmission ratio multiplied times the differential. and then divided by the radius of the wheel. That is really your true ratio that people always forget. They just go diff times trans as starting line ratio, but that's not true, because if you have a 30-inch tall tire versus a 28-inch tire, your ratio is different. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I do then is at each RPM range in each gear, I take the total gear ratio multiplication times the engine torque, and you get a complete force number at the patch where the tire intersects the pavement. So let's say I got 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, and I got a 2-to-1 first gear ratio, that's 2,000 pounds, and I got a 4-to-1 diff ratio, that's 8,000 pounds. Divide that by the radius of the wheel. Let's say, for example, I end up with 7,000 pounds of force. If you divide that force by the weight of the vehicle, let's say the vehicle weighs 3,500 pounds, you come up with a potential for the total amount of G-force the car could generate. So it'd be 7,000 or 7,500 divided by whatever I said, 7,000 divided by 3,500. You'd have a total potential for 2 Gs at the launch. But as you go through the RPM range and the engine's torque curve changes, and you change gear ratios in the transmission, the total amount of G-force that you potentially could generate gets lower and lower. And so what I do is I plot out all 5 gears, or maybe in your case 4 gears, and I make a total curve of what the G meter would look like if traction was never a problem. And so now I keep that G meter curve and I compare it to the curve that I get out of my data logger to get a percentage of perfection. I'm never going to be perfect, but if I have a run that's 78% of a perfect G meter curve, I take notes and I write down the conditions it took me to do that. Now, next time I'm racing in those conditions, I can go back and put that clutch set up, that gear ratio set up, that ignition timing. You know, it's all about keeping these notes and understanding what produced that result. So for me, it's mathematically derived and spreadsheet based, but I got to know how, you know, one question I like to ask in my class, I go, first of all, how many people are drag racers? Everybody raise their hand, right? Okay. For those of you that are drag racers, how many of you have ever made the perfect pass in your car? And furthermore, what would the perfect pass be in your car? What is ultimately the very best speed your car could ever do? Well, without doing the math in a spreadsheet like that, you'd never know.
Well, I have an answer.
Okay.
Answer. As long as it's faster than Rich's, that's the perfect pass.
For 5 days in a row.
Ouch, that hurts. Yeah. So you know, the theoretical perfect pass, right? For bracket racers, they do that all the time. A perfect pass is running my dial in and getting a trip zip on the tree, whatever. But rarely is their dial in the fastest their car could ever run, right? But for open, you know, for heads up open class racers like us, I need to know theoretically, if all the planets aligned, what could my car run? I know I'm never going to run that, but then here's what I do with that. I know I apologize. You're going to have a 3-hour freaking podcast here. I apologize.
No. As much time as you, this is awesome.
Yes,
Okay.
this is, yeah.
So what I do is I take that G meter curve, that's my theoretical best one, and then I compare that to one I got from the run we just did. What it does is it tells me to go work on the vehicle for the next run. For example, a lot of guys look at incrementals, 60 foot times, 330, 660, 1,000 foot, you know, obviously we look at all that stuff too. But what I want to know is where throughout the run could I have improved? Where did I go wrong? In other words, if I look at the back half of the track, so for us, we go from 660, the 8th mile, to the quarter mile, typically in about like 2.78 seconds would be a normal time for us. So we back half in 278. If I go and my best run ever, let's say, is a 775, which is not, I think we've been 66 or something, but just for argument's sake, okay, let's use easy numbers. My best run ever to date is an 80. And I just ran a 799 and made my best run ever, but it was slow in the back half of the track. How did I do that? Well, that means I must have done a really good job in the first part of the track.
Yeah.
Which means I don't need to go work on my clutch tune-up or my shocks or my starting line RPM. I got to work on my engine tune-up to make the back half of the track better. Or I just went 277 out the back and crushed it, but I was slower than my best ever run. So I got to go look at the front half of the track. Or I go, look, all right, we went 110 to the 60-foot cone, which is crushing it. We went 277 out the back, which is crushing it. But we went 329 to the middle, to the 330 instead of 325 like we should have. Well, there's only 2 things that would do that. Either my gear ratio selection wasn't right, or my driver didn't hit his shift points. So I either got to work on my driver or my car, but knowing where to work is where we make our progress when we go run to run to run. Should I be working on clutch and suspension at the starting line? Should I be working on my ratio selection so the car travels through the middle well? Should I be working on my engine tune-up so it goes out the back well? Or do I need to have a conversation with my driver about hitting shift points on time? Those are the 4 areas that we work on our program when we're racing.
So one of the things you mentioned was the formulas and calculations you do. So there's resources like that Wallace ET. They have lots of things on there. How accurate are those?
We almost always run better than their calculator. I think those are kind of made for the average middle of the road guy running a, Fox body with a LS single turbo and an automatic. You know what I mean? Like that type of stuff.
Okay.
The average guy is going to have really good results with that kind of stuff. But like if you were to put in the specs of like, a lot of times you can put in like engine power and weight of the car and it spits out a number.
Yeah.
Do that with like a pro stock car, and a pro stock car annihilates the calculator, right? They're way better than they should. Because you got to pick a point in the middle of the road. So I use the Wallace calculator a bunch. I think it's great, but it is just for like a reference point in the middle of the road.
So you mentioned something too. You talked about like the incrementals, like the 330 and stuff, and that would affect your gear ratio selection. I think, well, for Rich and I, because those are the ones that matter because we're asking the questions. But out of the listener base, I would say that's not really an option. I mean, our ratios are what's in the transmission. So,
sure.
So how much does that come down to still like at the 330, still chassis versus engine tune up versus, I mean, in some cases, well, I don't know if it really be clutch at that point because you should be engaged by 330. But.
Yeah, for you guys, it's going to be power management. How soon can I get the boost in? Can I get more boost in? So when I work on like a high, not everything I do is NA. I do some. I worked on Billy Glidden's nitrous pro mod car, and I'm working on Rod Chigfree's twin turbo, pro mod deal, and so not everything I do is NA. I just think it's like big kid stuff. So. But when we do power management, I do all the same math, right? Like I put in the power that the engine makes, I put in the ratios of the car, and you come up with a theoretical what if. So we have a target. The problem is when I ask people, well, what's a perfect run for your car? And you go, well, I don't know. Like, I'd like to run a 912. And I'm like, well, where'd you get that number? You're like, well, nobody in my class has ever run a 912. I'm like, I know. So we need to know how do I know when to stop? That's the problem. If we don't establish the real goal, I don't know how close I'm getting to it. So I don't know when to stop working on this thing over here and go look somewhere else for improvement. So the middle of the track is usually the easiest part because traction's not as much of a problem. And you've already got your suspension kind of set the way it's going to, whether you're trying to drive the tire into the ground and have the rear shocks extend, or whether you're got squat in the car or whatever, that stuff's already taken care of. If you made it from the starting line to 330 feet, the rest is just having a cigarette and waiting for the race to be over. You know what I mean? Like, especially quarter mile racing where there's nothing beyond the 8th mile but heartache, right? Like that's where everything.
True story.
Well, we're just in 4th gear making a sandwich after that.
Yeah, you're just hanging out, So if you got to the 330 cone, the rest of it's probably gonna be tune up, right? Do you have your engine tune up on point? Really, all the work is done in the first half of the track. So in the first really 100 feet, make it quickly to the 60-foot cone. Everything you do there gets magnified and multiplied out the back. So if you can.
I have another question for you because I think I know the answer, but you're convincing me that I don't know much. So the rev limiter, like when you launch the car, your rev limiter is at 4,600. Do you release the rev limiter at what point of clutch engagement?
Okay. That's a great question, actually. And it's a tool that we use to manipulate the car. So in case—
Good question, Rich. I like it.
Yeah. In case people are listening and don't know what we mean there. When you push the clutch pedal to the floor, there's a switch that activates a rev limiter. And so as we begin to release the clutch pedal, oftentimes we can release the rev limiter so that the engine can start to get a run before we actually engage the clutch. We're talking about the same thing, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Totally.
Big smile.
So that's one of 2 tools that we use in tuning our package. The other is clutch air gap. So every time we make a run in the drag race car, we go reset the air gap on the clutch because that dramatically affects the reaction time of the vehicle and the driver. And in heads up drag racing, reaction time is everything. And so It's a tool that you will often see professional drag racers that have clutch cars use, is the air gap and the two-step rev limiter. The other third one would be clutch ratio. You may have noticed on your clutch linkage down by the bell housing, there's like different bolts you can put that in. A lot of times you can increase or decrease the ratio of clutch travel. Guys with hydraulic clutches don't know anything about this. People that
would be
also
this
run
guy right here.
those are the kind of people that run hydraulic lifters too. So let's not. You know,
Oh, ouch.
it's the lazy man's way.
Oh my God.
Uh,
Wow.
you only thought we were going to be friends, right?
I'll just mute my microphone.
Uh,
We're best friends. Come on.
that's
man.
right. So by moving those three items and changing the ratio of how quickly the car reacts to the driver's input, for example, when you look at a professional driver, let's say Erica Enders, who I used to work for, she just won her 5th championship a couple weeks ago, right? When you watch her performance, it's not an accident that when they go out every time, so she'll go out and qualify and they'll do whatever they do. But on race day, if you're the number 1 qualifier, you get to race who first round? Number 16 guy. So you got somebody that barely made the field racing the number 1 qualifier. The last thing on the planet that Erica wants to do is go out there in red light and lose to the slowest guy out there. So what they do is they'll slow the pedal ratio down. She moves her foot in cadence with the Christmas tree the same way every single time. But if the clutch moves a little bit slower, you'll see she might be 40 or 50 or even 60 or 70 on the tree in round 1. And then the second round, she'll go out there and she'll be like 30. And then the third round, she'll be 20. And by the time she goes to the final round, she's 007 every single time. And that's because she's doing the same thing and the crew chief is bringing the car to her during the day. So we'll do the same thing when we go out there in our cars, play with that. You know, if you have a car that's a little bit underpowered or you have a track that's exceedingly sticky, you might want to let the rev limiter come off earlier than you engage the clutch to really give the engine a run at the clutch. But if the track is marginal, that's the last thing you want to do because it's going to hit the tires off. We're going to blow the tires clean off the car. So we'll run anywhere from about as tight as 30 to as loose as 70 on that clutch engagement gap on our race car. What that ends up being on somebody else's car, I can't tell you, but I mean, that's just honest and open. The got about a 40 thousandths window there and roughly the same in air gap on the clutch. The problem with air gap on a clutch is if you don't have enough, you'll roll through the beams. So on a finger clutch like you've got, Rich, more RPM, you push the clutch to the floor and then you've stabbed the throttle. It wants the levers want to push the throw out bearing back against your foot. So if you don't have enough air gap there, it can have too much clutch grip and the car rolls the beams and you red light. So you got to have enough air gap so that it doesn't roll the beams, but not so much that it takes you half an hour to let go of the clutch pedal and you're late on the tree. Again, it comes down to gear ratio, weight of the vehicle, and traction that's going to affect what you need for your car. But we would typically be somewhere around 60 as a midpoint setting for ours.
So I have a lazy person question. So you talked about having the clutch set up so when you release the clutch, which would then release the 2-step or the rev limiter, it gets a run at the clutch.
Yep.
So in my setup right now, I typically see 1,000 RPM run. So if I have the 2-step set at 4,000, it hits the clutch at 5, or 5, it hits it at 6. Is that in line with what you want to see? Or, I mean, clearly it sounds like you tune that for the track.
We do, and ratio, right? So like if I have more gear ratio, I need less run at the clutch because it magnifies everything.
Yeah, and our gear ratios are fixed. I mean, with 271 first gear with whatever our ring and pinion is. So
yeah, and you guys specifically, I think because your cars are heavy and you do all that kind of high mile an hour stuff, you're probably what, like 3.5 differential, 350, 360, 320?
Yeah, exactly. Rich is 350 on 370.
Yeah, so like our car is probably going to be something like 488 to 513, and so you got way more ratio leveraging against all that stuff. So what I do is going to be different than what you can do.
Got it.
And the car's lighter, and you know what I mean. There's just a bunch of factors. I hate that I keep saying that over and over. Oh well, you know it's different, but the problem is it's just different.
Yeah.
Important is understanding the variables so that you can control.
I have a specific question about. So your clutch, you guys can basically, you don't have to pull a trans, you don't have to do anything. So you must be able to just screw the hat in or back the hat off from a little window on the top part of the bell housing. Is that how that works?
No, we pull the trans and bell housing out every round.
Whew.
Oh, and yeah, and then you just reshim.
Yep. So the clutch sits on slider rails. So on the bottom, it's not the clutch, the transmission's got sliders. So if you took a tube and sliced it in half, you'd have like two buttons. So you weld those on the floor of the car, and then you take that same diameter tube and bolt that to the bottom of the transmission. So now you just unbolt the 4 bolts on the ears on the front of the transmission. You take the drive shaft off, slide the transmission back on those slider rails, and now you can zip the bell housing off real quick and you have full access to the clutch. We can get in there, and it's hot when you first come in the pits, but notwithstanding that, you can have the engine, you can have the transmission out of the car and the bell housing off, and establish, where you can reach the clutch in about 6 minutes or so.
Wow.
We can't do that at drag week.
No.
Yeah. So I'm lazy. I don't want to do any of that at drag week. So I'm really interested in what, you guys have had success with clutch wise too. I came on the show hoping to hear more about Bang Shift Billy and the hydraulic setup. And like, honestly, I just want to drive drag week. I did it in 2018 in Studebaker. Me and him, we did it together. We had an absolute blast, and our strategy was to work as little as possible. So we never once checked the valve lash on that engine the whole entire week. That was a solid roller. We turned that thing, 85, 8,800. I never touched the valve lash, and I never touched the engine tune up the entire week, and we finished second in our class. So,
Wow. Wow.
So that's my goal, is do that again, because I'm lazy. I don't want to work that hard.
Well, I would be flattered if you have questions. I mean, this has been really mind-boggling for me. Like, this is great. This podcast is awesome.
Well, I'm enjoying it too, but no, honestly, I told you, I watched your Bang Shift Billy, kind of like your infomercials about it and stuff, and it was hilarious. But when I saw it, I was immediately going, man, that's the same exact setup that I did on my race car, but I did it with a CO2, which was a real pain.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's so much easier. And I'm really torn between a mechanical clutch or a hydraulic clutch. Rich and I, we talked about this kind of offline.
Yeah.
And I'm still torn. In fact, we've ordered the transmission, but I haven't ordered a clutch yet because I haven't really decided really what we're going to do and how much we want to work. So, the difference is you guys have pretty heavy cars. I'm guessing they probably weigh 3,800 pounds.
Yeah.
Just laughing. That's not good.
Yeah. I'm like right about 37 with me in it.
Okay.
And I'm 4,050.
4,050. So, I mean, obviously I have nothing to worry about with the transmission then, because my car is probably 2,600 or something.
No,
2,650, what I'm really trying to decide is I don't need a big giant like 10-inch clutch like you guys are running. I think I'm going to struggle with that. Would be way too much clutch for the car.
Mm-hmm.
Get in that situation, it's like you can't take enough base away from it. And so I'm considering running the smaller, like 7-inch or dual 7-inch or something like that. But I really feel like something along the lines of a Bang Shift Billy would help. But I'm curious, how many guys do you have running it, and what I really want to know, Bill, is how long does it take to find the window? How long does it take to tune it?
It's very quick. Providing you get the setup and the wire. I mean, it's relatively simple, and I don't want this to sound like an advertisement, but really, depending on how you activate it, I use my Holly to activate it.
Okay.
And the Bluetooth controller does all the ramps and everything. So I'm not using the ECU to do any kind of pulse width modulation. But you can also use the master switch to activate it as well. One of the videos on there, I show setting it up. It literally, I did 7 launches in the car to get it dialed in. It took me 12 minutes.
So that's awesome. Now what I want to know is what propensity is there to burn the clutch disc when you're trying to learn all that? How much did you have to get it out and work on it?
So that's an excellent question. I get this from a lot of people. It truly depends on the type of clutch you're running. I run sintered iron discs in a diaphragm clutch. Whatever. The heat, they're designed to slip, so it's not, you're not going to kill it.
Okay.
And I do run a infrared sensor on my ball housing to measure clutch temperature. And it's really just to monitor the discs itself. Really difficult to get an accurate temperature reading on that. So I'm really reading the temperature of the hat, but it gives me an idea.
And it's a relative number you can revert back to, and
like I relatively know what number I want to see, because temperature does affect the sintered iron clutch.
Sure.
it affects how it's going to respond. And I have a general idea of where I would like to see that clutch temperature before I make a pass. If
Okay.
it's too cold, it's going to be too slippery. If it's too hot, it's a little too grabby. So I know generally where I want to be. If you're running an organic clutch, extremely sensitive to temperature.
Okay.
And you need to be very conservative on how long you slip it. Right now, I have my total, I guess it is the slip time, but it's the total time that the controller is acting on the clutch is a total time of 1 second. And I'll be honest with you, I've sat down with Rich a lot and we've looked at his data logs to see from the point where he dumps the clutch to see his full clutch engagement on a adjustable slipper clutch, how long that engagement period is. And it's approximately 1 second. So that's where I've kind of tailored the initial settings. This past week, we had a customer with a GT500, super impressive car, had a best ET of 955 for 2 years. He was trying to best that. And it was a 4,100 pound GT500 full interior car. He put the clutch controller on that, went to the track on the second pass, knocked over half a second off the ET, went from like 155, 60 foots to a 136, and the car went 899. That was on the second pass. So there's still room for tuning in there for him.
And so that's awesome. The lesson to be learned there is I talked earlier about, the early part of the track being magnified everywhere,
Yes.
And so, it's not exactly double, but we always say like whatever you gain to the 60 foot, you could just about double it. So you figure he gained, 20 something and he goes out the back 500 quicker, so.
Yeah.
Badass.
And so some of this, there's really 3 settings on the clutch controller. There's the delay, which what I wanted was a person to be able to install this in the car and be able to bracket race it, because a lot of the clutch controllers out there, and they work well for their intended purpose, but they slow down the entire stroke of the clutch pedal for all practical purposes, not all of them, but generally it slows down the whole stroke of the clutch pedal. Well, that's all great, except if you have a 4-inch clutch pedal, the first 3 inches doesn't do anything. That's the air gap, basically.
Yep.
So if you slow that down, you dump the clutch trying to cut a light, the other guy's gone and you're still waiting for your clutch to grab.
Mm-hmm.
So with the delay, you dump the clutch and it flies uninhibited through that dead spot. And then you can fine tune how hard or soft it hits the clutch, or hits the bite point is what I call it. So you can control where it hits the bite point, and then you have an option to hold it there for up to 2 seconds, which I don't know, maybe if you're tractor pulling or something, that would work. But the basic settings are you hold it there for 0.25, and then you have a ramp downtime, and that's set for 0.75. So it flies right to the bite point, holds it for a quarter, 0.25, and then does a ramp. And honestly, the videos and last year, that option wasn't even available on the clutch controller. It was only the hold. So I'm going to be fine tuning the hold and the ramp time to see, because when you hit that bite point, and this is where I'll use my G meter to see data, what the car is reacting like. But, you can increase or decrease that hold time, and then you can bring in the ramp or increase it, decrease it. And knowing that ramp time, there's only a small function in that ramp time, because as you get towards the end of it, the clutch is effectively coupled.
Yeah.
But those are some settings that you can still play with, and I'm going to fine tune it. And then the other piece I'm going to be doing is I figured out my boost controller. So when I'm on the 2-step, it's actually going to be building boost, because before I was like 1 or 2 pounds. It was like whatever, but Rich is getting radial tires and I got to figure some stuff out. so I'm going to be turning up the boost, which is definitely going to change the tune up for the clutch, because I'm going to be hitting it with more power. So it's going to slip more if I leave the settings alone. But now I'm able to fairly easily do that from the app instead of crawling under the car. And
so what's cool about that is you'll be able to look and like tune the ramp and the that kind of stuff to the track settings, right? Like, so I'll look at the track and go, man, it's not very good. Like, we're going to delay this,
soften it up a bit. If it's the heat of the day and everything, like you just said, I can look at the 4 cars in front of me, and if they're just absolutely annihilating the tires, then yeah, I'll soften things up. Maybe soften up the bite point, slow the ramp down a bit. Apply the power a little bit slower
Sure.
because the track won't hold it.
That's right.
So you have that ability, and you can save those clutch tune-ups. So you could put, name them whatever, Ben Best Friend tune-up or something like that.
Right.
and then you can just hit load. You can just load those. Once you get those kind of ironed out, then you can just load those tunes up, and then it's not really a guessing game because you've figured it out with calculations or
You
whatever.
could probably build a spreadsheet.
I love spreadsheets.
100%. Yeah.
I do like me some spreadsheets.
So it's we've been 2 hours and 15 minutes already.
Just
So
getting
maybe-
started.
No, we had some audience questions, but I think we may have to say these for the next podcast. But maybe the most important one on here that I will ask is number 4. Do you want to ask it, Rich, or should I?
Oh boy.
No, you go ahead, Bill. It's
Well, this was an audience question, but it is perhaps the best question of this whole podcast. Why do you think stiff shift guys are better looking?
I mean, it's obvious. I mean, really, and
I think with
when you have a stick shift, truly, you kind of walk with your shoulders back a little more. You're, chin up. You just you're kind of king of the walk.
no purse. We should do the TKO. We should do the TKO round with him though.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Nobody ever puts a stick shift in their car and goes, "Man, I wish I went back to an automatic." Right? Like,
Nobody.
Well, you know what they say, unless they really miss their purse.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly.
All right, Rich. So why don't you kick off the TKO?
Okay, first gear. What's the first car you owned or modified?
First car I owned was a super nice maroon Oldsmobile 79 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale.
Woo!
Like 8-track deck in it and like floor interior. Pretty sweet. Yeah.
Nice.
All mine.
All right, second gear. What, in your opinion, has been the biggest technology change to move our sport forward?
No question about it. Engine management, EFI, data acquisition. Hands down, no question about it.
Sweet.
So I think we know what your day job is, so I don't think we have to ask you that one. So we're gonna skip third gear. We're gonna money shift. Hey, Bill, we're just gonna go right from second to fourth. So this is a good question for you. What influences you to build your cars? So I think you talked a bit about the one that you're going to build.
The biggest thing for me is I want to be different. I don't want to build cookie cutter copycats kind of stuff. Even when I had my Mustang, as cool as that car was and as much as I loved it, I hated that it was just another Fox body. And I love Fox body. There's nothing wrong with them. You're just not really being super unique when you show up with that. So when we went to build the new car, it was like, I want it to be when people see it, they know who that car.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to shift it into overdrive. What, in your opinion, is the secret to stick shift racing?
Clutch management, 100%. Two
right.
Clutch management and ratio selection, getting the engine to be at the correct RPM at the right time. So that's differential and trans, but mostly clutch management.
Awesome.
Okay, we're going to give you the T56 question. So if you had to give advice to somebody getting into this sport, stick shift racing, what would you give them? What would be your advice?
My advice would be to spend the money in the areas that matter, and specifically data acquisition. It'll be way less frustrating and results way faster if you are actually looking at data rather than just shooting from the blind. So that would be clutch speed, drive shaft speed, and G meter, among all the other things. If you just have those 3 things, spend whatever money you have to spend to make sure that you know what's happening when you make a change, because otherwise you're just groping around in the dark and you'll do that a really long time.
Nice.
Yeah. I know when I put my EFI system on my car, the first thing I realized is I'm not putting my foot to the floor.
Right. Yeah.
I would have never known that if I didn't have data acquisition, and I didn't know that. And it was like, why is the car bogging? Oh, I'm moving back in the seat. My foot's coming off the pedal. Yeah. So that's a great answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really feel like I feel bad for racers I see that don't have data acquisition. They spend all this money on the trick of the week carburetor or the trick of the week camshaft or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you'd be so much faster if you just knew what was going on.
Yeah. All right, Ben. Well, tell people where they can find you social media, your website, UFI University, all that business.
Yep. So pretty
Plug it.
easy. EFI101.com is the website. You can get me, Ben, at EFI101.com is my email. We have EFI University social medias on Insta and Facebook. And let's see, then we have the 10K technology stuff. That's a little bit smaller and it's growing rapidly, but pay attention to that stuff. If you're into like high RPM and you like low maintenance drag and drive type stuff, like be watching closely in that segment. And that's it. I'm sorry I didn't have more to share with you guys.
Well, and I think I missed it. What was your home address and your credit card number?
Right.
Okay, so again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no
Let's
worries. It was
a
super
huge
fun.
thanks to Stick Shift Nation for hosting this podcast. Travis does all the graphics, pictures, video, everything you're going to see in this. When you see it, that's all Travis from Stick Shift Nation. So thank you for that. And you can find Clutch Burners podcast on 9. That's right, 9 different platforms, audio, and you can catch it on YouTube. And if you want to see it continue to grow, head over to stickracing.com, grab a Stick Shift Nation shirt or sticker. And I said this last time, if there's a want for a Clutch Burners merch, let us know, because we might just need to make 2 for PRI for me and Rich to wear. But if other people want them, we might make more than that. So that's it, man. Thanks so much, friend.
Yes, thanks so much for your time.
Super. Yeah, you're welcome. Super fun to be here and hang out with you guys.
Awesome.
That was fantastic. Yeah,
Awesome.
All right.
Well, let me know when you want to do it again. I'll come back and we'll talk about other stuff.